Well, good evening and welcome to the first regular meeting of the Ames City Council for 2025. And we're going to start off tonight with a proclamation for Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Are you sure? Here I have all this wonderful proclamation written out, and Dr. George says, just read the therefore, so I'll just read the therefore. Therefore, I, John A. Hale, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim January 2025 as Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month and encourage all residents to become more informed on this growing problem, to be vigilant and report suspicious activity, and to work towards solutions to end trafficking in all of its forms in our community. If you see something that does not look right, please take action and call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-3737-888. I think we all know Dr. George, and if you'd like to share a few things, you're welcome to do so. Thank you.
I thought by asking you to just read the whereas, the therefore, rather than all the whereases, it give me more time. Because I have a lot to bring the council up to date on in the fight against human trafficking in our community. One of the major things that has happened in the last year is a conviction, or actually a guilty plea by a trafficker. And I'm reading from the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is a press release that an Ames man pled guilty on November 26 to 15 counts of sex trafficking by fraud and coercion. And this individual was a former licensed nurse practitioner and Ames business owner. He admitted to using fraud and coercion to coerce 14 victims to engage in commercial sex trafficking acts from 2004 to 2023, 19 years that this went on without knowledge. And I want to pay tribute to the Ames Police Department. They investigated this. They handled it very, very well. These are difficult cases to get evidence and to get witnesses to step forward. But they did a good job because the evidence was so profound that this heinous crime that was committed that went unseen, that there was enough evidence that this individual pled guilty. That doesn't happen in many trafficking cases. So finally, skipping over a lot of it, sentencing is scheduled for March 24th, 2025, before Chief U.S. District Court Judge Rose for each of the 15 sex trafficking counts. Markley faces a 15-year mandatory minimum term of imprisonment and a maximum term of life in prison. I think those that have said trafficking doesn't happen here, and those that think that trafficking is only carried out by victims who are from foreign countries have their eyes open. There's just no way around it. I've left for all the council members and the mayor a update on, we just came out with this from the Network Against Human Trafficking. That's our logo at the bottom. And tomorrow, by the way, the governor is going to proclaim January 2025 as Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. We just had a meeting with our board this afternoon, and people reported in on cities now and county boards of supervisors. We're trying to go across the state as a great way of engaging local government in the fight against human trafficking by passing these proclamations, and we're now up to 50. So you were the first to do it. I won't go over the stats, but just to point out that when I first started volunteering on the board against the Network Against Human Trafficking that year, which was just over 10 years ago, we had 60 survivors who had been rescued or found their way to safety and freedom, because it's slavery, it's modern slavery. The rest of the world calls it modern slavery. We call it human trafficking in this country. That was just over 10 years ago. And now, as you can see, unduplicated, the number has gone from 60 to 600. Down below, you'll also see that we did get the state and the state legislature, and we'll be down there tomorrow asking for more, to create training, mandatory training for hotels and motels. That was first done here in Ames and Story County. We had 23 hotels and motels that voluntarily took training. That led to this being passed by the entire state. And look at that. Over 24,000 hotel motel workers have been trained to recognize human trafficking. 740 certified hotels and motels. And I'm just so proud of that. And Ames has been a leader in many different ways. And this was just one of them. The stickers that we put out and that we have all throughout Ames, those were created by us in Ames, and they're now we've distributed over 15,000 stickers, mostly in bathroom stalls. So with that, I'll thank you for your support. Ask you to, one last thing is to come to a event in honor of Human Trafficking Prevention Month at Iowa State University on Monday, January 27th in the Sunroom. We have a ISU new club. It's called Rotaract, and they're the sponsor, and the Network Against Human Trafficking is a co-sponsor. And we're going to start with the screening of a documentary on human trafficking in Iowa. And in the documentary, there are 3 human traffickers that were human trafficking victims that were interviewed and now are survivors. One of those 3 will be on a panel. There'll be a panel of 4, and she's a Story County resident. She went through YSS for treatment, and she interviewed in the documentary, and she'll be there answering questions. The other that I wanted to mention is also went through YSS. By the way, this first woman, her name is Heather. Don't share the last name. Heather is a foster parent now, serving, and she has 3 girls, all who were sex trafficked. Isn't that great? I mean, how she's turned her life around. And by the way, she was groomed when she became a freshman at an Iowa State college, and spent 6 years in trafficking. Her parents didn't know where she was. The second one that I wanted to mention, and then I'll be done, Mr. Mayor, is Brittany. And Brittany just wrote a book about her experience. She also was trafficked at age 14, run away from foster home, was hungry. She was at a Hy-Vee grocery store. We now have the stickers at all the Hy-Vee grocery store bathrooms and Fairway. And she was stealing food. And a trafficker happened to be there. And he started grooming her by buying her food, then offered $100 if he could take photos of her. She'd be a great model. And within a week of her going into his van, she was being trafficked. She had been beaten, drugged, and was being trafficked in a hotel in Chicago. And she tells her story in this book. I'm so proud of her. She is now forming her own nonprofit organization to help trafficking victims. I'm just so proud of her. So she will be on the panel. So I hope you will come and hear them and others speak. Thank you again for your support. Take this photo. Are there any other of our allies here today that I missed? We have.
My involvement is through the trucking industry. We've got several in Des Moines that are very avid with that, truck stops and trucking. So that's a wonderful thing to do.
The trucking industry has become one of our best allies.
All right, we'll move on to consent. Does council wish to pull any item from consent tonight?
Mayor, I'd like to pull item 11.
Okay, anything else? Entertain a motion approving consent less item number 11.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, number 11.
So Mayor, I pulled this for a couple reasons. First is this is another one of those instances where we have an opportunity to highlight something that we're doing for the climate action plan, but also I think it's worth noting why we're doing this particular thing tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Corey.
So item 11, we're waiving purchasing policies to buy hybrid police vehicles, 2 of them that are on the lot, so we can put them into service as soon as possible. As you know, over the last few years, since COVID, we've had a hard time getting police vehicles, and then we had a hard time getting hybrid police vehicles. We were able to find some on a lot through the state bid. We think this is a great opportunity to get back into the hybrids, and it shows that hopefully the market's kind of corrected and we'll be back to ordering normal. But the hybrids are a huge benefit. We get double the gas mileage on hybrid police vehicles. A lot of that is due to reduced idle time because they're on all the time and run 24/7. So hopefully this gets us back to all hybrid police units in the near future.
Thank you.
Mayor, I would move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. We're going to move on to public forum, and typically the first person who jumps up at public forum is Richard Dio. And many of you may be aware, Richard passed away this weekend. And it's with heavy heart that we report that. I'd say probably Richard was one of the more colorful Ames residents. And he and I at times would not necessarily see eye to eye, but I'm going to honestly miss him saying, have the greatest day when I leave City Hall, when he opens the door at the end of the day. And it's just really hard to reflect on the fact that he's gone. I'd like to just I usually gave him 70 seconds. He knew that when I said, do you have any other item of city business, it was time for him to go ahead and sit down, and we had that agreement, even though we never talked about it. So if you just join me in a moment of silence, I'm going to set my, like I have normally, my alarm for 70 seconds, or my timer, 7 seconds, and then we'll move on to public forum. So just please join me in this reflection and honoring of Richard. Thank you. Is anybody else who want to address council tonight under public forum? Please, if you come to the podium and state your name, and you may begin.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I was a teacher, so I was used to throwing my voice. My name's Jan Kovach, and I moved here about 5 years ago from Cedar Rapids. And I taught for 35 years. I had all kinds of kids. I had, poor kids and middle class and rich kids. And I had homeless kids. I had a mother that was high on drugs come to a conference. I had a kid who stole the candy bar out of the refrigerator and became homeless because the boyfriend kicked him out. I had a girl who became pregnant from her mother's client, and she ran away with another 14-year-old. I had really smart kids, so I have a lot of experiences. The reason I'm here tonight is about 2 weeks ago, I woke up early, which I sometimes do, and I decided to go to Panera's, and I love the old neighborhoods of Ames. So I decided to drive through them downtown, and then I was going to go to Panera's. And I happened to go by the library, and there was a man sleeping on the bench outside the library in a sleeping bag. And I thought, so I stopped and went over to him. I said, "Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, I called the bridge twice yesterday and I couldn't get in. So I'm here." And there was still some time before the library opened. And I know you're not supposed to give money, but it was so cold out. Another lady came up who knew him, and I gave him some money so that they could go over to Fairway or someplace and get warm for a while. And so I started thinking, well, why is he out here, sleeping on a bench? And that started me investigating. Now, I was involved with the Salvation Army and the shelters in Cedar Rapids a little bit. We had a flood, and I helped at the shelters, and I gave money and mittens and hats and things. So I've been looking around at Ames, and I'd found our shelters, so I kind of knew where they were, and I kind of watched for people that might be on the street. So anyway, I started investigating what services or how the people could get into the a shelter, and I called the bridge, and they told me that they used to have vouchers, but they don't anymore. That their funding was cut, so the vouchers have gone to the Salvation Army. And that they told me at that time that the police used to pick up people and take them to motels. Well, I kept investigating, and every time the stories got bigger. And then I gave some bus tickets to some people. I found out you can get them free in the library. And one day I was at Food on First, and I was giving out bus tickets, and I met this man. And he was sitting there, and I asked him if he wanted bus tickets. And we started chatting, and I've been meeting with him for the last week or so because I found out he's bipolar, and has tendencies towards schizophrenia. I think he is paranoid. Patty knows him at Food at First. And I found out he can't go to 9 places. he said. He can't go to the bridge, and he can't go in the library and use the phone, and he can't get bus tickets in the library because he's bipolar and he acts out, and his behavior has caused him to get in trouble. He actually warned me and told me that he'd been in prison, and he told me that he had been in trouble with, acting out, kind of like warning me that I needed to be careful. I thought that was kind of something that he would do that, knowing that I was this, goody two-shoes type person trying to help him. Anyway, I started investigating around Ames, and I've been to all kinds of agencies. I tried to get his caseworker at the Health and Human Services and found out they don't have caseworkers anymore. I actually went to the Salvation Army and found out that it's out on 13th Street past the bus schedule. So people that need a voucher cannot get out there on the bus. And it's about, I think it's somewhere around 8 blocks at least, or 13, it's somewhere in there. And that's a long ways. I found out that you can't get a job without an ID. And to get an ID, you have to go out the other direction on Lincoln Way to the DMV, and that's quite a trek. I found out where there's some pantries, and I found out where there's some places to get clothing and all that sort of thing. So I've done some investigation. I've done some contributing. I've given to the bridge and so on. But tonight, that man I'm talking about is sleeping out in a tent. I bought him a sleeping bag, and it's just because I really care about this guy. And I bought him a sleeping bag and a ground cloth, and he got a tent from somebody because it's very difficult for him to live in group shelters because of his acting out. He told me in the beginning his goal was to get some meds.
Ma'am, normally I ask people to kind of limit the comments to 3 minutes. You're at 5.
Okay,
Could you
I'll summarize.
And actually, there's a couple of items on the agenda that I hope you're going to stay for, because on item number 27, there's going to be a report on homeless outreach and also a staff report. I'm sorry, on the homeless outreach, and that might answer some of your
I'm sorry.
questions.
I know that you're working on this,
Yes.
and I know that the Board of Supervisors are, because I've talked to them. I suggested to the city that they needed a shelter, that it's cold. It was cold last week around 0 at night. This week it is again. And I come from Cedar Rapids, where they have a shelter where people can go at night and during the day and at least be warm and maybe get water, and then volunteers bring in food and that sort of thing. So far, I've been told that that is impossible. I also think they need a safe place to put their stuff, because their stuff's stolen over and over again. And so when they lose all their stuff and their IDs and everything, they can't get them. And transportation can be a problem because the bus routes don't go far enough. I've told you about the 2 men. I was very humbled today. I was leaving the food on First, and a guy was sitting there eating a dinner. He turns to me and he says, "Do you want half of my dinner?" And I was like, here this guy doesn't have much, and he's offering me his dinner. So $20,000 was supposedly given by the Board of Supervisors. So we have that right now. And the bridge is overcrowded every night. Number one, what if it's beyond the fire code?
And I'm sorry, could you please just what's your specific request?
These are my last points. If there's a fire at the
30 seconds.
All right,
Okay.
if there's a fire at the bridge and people don't get out, it's going to be a catastrophe, both for the people who don't and for the city of Ames. That's a problem. And if people freeze outside, that's also a problem. And we don't want a reputation of those things happening. Thank you for listening.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry I got carried away.
Thank you. Appreciate your caring for them.
Yep.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close public forum and move on to item number 26. Does anyone have any questions for Corey regarding the contract with Resource Consulting Engineers? There's no questions. Open up public forum comment. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Very good. All right, we'll move on to item number 27, resolution approving reallocation of some funds towards homeless outreach. Pa.
Mayor, City Council, in early November, you approved up to $15,000 towards partnering with ISU to do some meetings with service providers, but also some direct outreach to folks who are unsheltered. So what we've done since November is we've ramped up our local team to do some outreach instead. And so the request before you today is to reallocate the remaining $11,250 from the contract with ISU Extension to this local team that is doing some outreach. One of the things that we heard from having these service provider roundtable discussions is that it would be helpful to have some sort of a flex fund to be able to assist folks as they encounter them. And so that's the recommendation that's before you. I want to invite the outreach team up here. They're sitting in the back there just to share with you what they have seen over the last couple of months. So come on up, and you guys can stand over there and do the presentation. If you guys want to introduce yourselves and then talk through, yeah. Or yeah, you can sit if you prefer, or you can stand, whichever you choose. Okay.
Yeah, there's one more there. Yeah, you're there.
You just ask that when you're talking, if you make sure you get close to the microphone so people in the back can hear, and me also.
Thank you, Council, for the opportunity to talk about a very difficult and complex issue that affects our community as a whole. First, I would like to introduce our outreach team, who will also share their insights and ideas as we continue to try and assist our community members who struggle with housing. I'm Julie Saxton. I'm the mental health advocate with the Ames Police Department.
I'm Susan Moore. I am a social worker at Mary Greeley Medical Center in Ames. I do behavioral health services as well as community outreach.
My name is Nick Tornstra. I'm a paramedic. I work with the Arch team.
I'm Becky Lundy. I'm the Arch social worker with Mary Greeley.
Kathy Pinkerton, and I'm the director of the service center for Salvation Army. And then by default, I'm also the case manager because we only have 3 staff.
Council, our team has worked very hard over the last few months to help some of our most vulnerable citizens who are experiencing homelessness or on the verge of becoming unhoused. We've conducted weekly outreach to the Romero House, where we have established relationships with the staff and those who utilize the Romero House. We have been able to sit down and learn who people are, their stories, and ways that we can best assist them. I think it's important to point out that outreach looks different for every person we encounter, given their needs. For some, is just to listen. For others, we're referring them to local resources such as Food at First for a warm meal, CICS for case management, with the hopes that they will qualify for additional programming to be able to support them long term. We have worked closely with the Bridge Home for either temporary shelter or permanent supportive housing, or we will refer individuals and families to the Salvation Army, who can assist in helping folks get off the street by means of hotel vouchers. For some, help comes in the form of bus tickets to go home to be with family members, or somewhere that a friend has agreed to help so they do not have to sleep on the street one more night. Outreach also looks like offering first aid, giving Narcan to someone in active overdose, driving around Ames looking for people that are camped out on the streets, in parks, under the bridges, camping by the river, sleeping on the curb, or sometimes even laying down in the bushes, hoping we can find a place for them to stay that's not outside. Outreach is spending 4 hours in the cold working on an application to get supportive housing for someone sleeping in a bush next to the library, or buying food, medical supplies, paying pet fees at hotels, buying bus tickets and clothing out of providers' own pockets when there is no funding to cover these costs. Outreach is the Ames Fire Department buying a car seat for the Arch team to safely transport a young mother and baby to the Bridge home who were homeless and needed a bus ticket. Outreach is 2 social workers, a mental health advocate, the Bridge home staff, and Arch on the phone for hours with various organizations to help a family of 4 who was getting evicted and put out on the street. Outreach, also looks like some people just saying, "No, thank you. I don't want your help." That is also the reality of outreach that our team faces on a daily and weekly basis. Outreach is educating our community on the unseen things that the city and agencies are doing behind the scenes and have experience with. Outreach is also our team going home emotionally exhausted, crying, knowing that even though there is supposed to be a system in place to help, there are actually many barriers that tie our hands and prevent sustainable solutions to a very long and complex problem. Since mid-November 2024, our team has successfully helped house 4 individuals who were living on the street, 1 who was living in a hut by the river with severe medical conditions. Our team can continue these efforts knowing that we have helped find homes for those that did not have one, and we will continue to work hard to find support and long-term solutions for others that are in similar circumstances. I want to make sure to note that the success of our team would not have happened without the collaboration with the Bridge Home and Salvation Army. And we will continue to partner with both agencies and other organizations moving forward to help our most vulnerable. In addition, we have been able to network and learn more about other local agencies and organizations that we were not as familiar with, to be able to provide even more support and resources for those we are working with. This has given us an opportunity to work closely with the homeless liaison with the Ames Community School District. And we hope to be able to provide more support to families in the district who are on the verge of becoming unhoused, and also those who are in need of resources to assist with rent, food, clothing, car repairs, mental health, and substance use services. And there are a lot. Our team has also started collaborating with the Bridge Home staff each week to go over clients and cases that we share to be able to provide the highest quality of care and support to each person and family. Working as a group has proven to show that wraparound case management helps fill the gaps that we see on a regular basis. Our team would also like to now share some insights from our outreach. So I will let Susan, if you want to start off.
Yes, first of all, I just want to say thank you for letting us speak tonight at the meeting. So this is just a brief rundown of the things that we see and the things that we do. There is so much to that. I can't emphasize that enough. It is a lot of time spent looking for people that are in need, finding people that are, as Julie mentioned, sleeping in the bushes. And it takes a whole team of people to be able to provide those services. There are just so many people that are in need in this area. We've had the opportunity to also talk with people about mental health needs as well when we're out there doing a full assessment of what are your needs. Okay, so you're unhoused. Lots of people have mental health concerns. I haven't had my meds for months. What do I do? Where do I go? Maybe not in crisis, but I'm not even sure what direction to head to. So it really takes all of us working together as a team, and each thing that we bring as a team to help the community.
So one of the things I noticed working in the role of a paramedic with Arch is, again, what Susan kind of alluded to also, is that these needs are interconnected and complex. And, you know, the housing needs are just the beginning, because a lot of that is related to mental health, to, you know, figuring out what meds to take and when, making sure my prescriptions are filled on time, and also recognizing, hey, maybe you need to see a doctor today for this, for whatever's going on. Maybe you've been sleeping out in the cold so long, you're now having some secondary health issues with your, you know, with your feet, your hands, you know, and then you add on top of that the mental health conditions that are typically in those situations as well. So assessing that, being able to de-escalate some of that, and figure out, okay, what's an emergency and what is something we need to work on long term. And so that's one of my roles on the outreach team as well, as kind of intervening at times when maybe there is an emergency that requires kind of an escalation to, you know, emergency room type care. So thank you very much.
Again, thank you for having us here. And thank you. We've had several meetings recently. There's different task forces and other things like that, trying to figure out the problem or solutions to what is a very real problem. And I think having this team and having everyone who's willing to listen and support and provide ideas, I just remember my mom always saying, many hands makes light work. And so the more people we have involved and the more people that we keep adding to our team and to the folks that are interested in the creativity that comes out of that and the different solutions, because this didn't happen overnight. We can't solve it overnight. And so I just think that all of the systems working together right now are really helping. I will say I don't have any stake in this reassessing or reallocating this money. But I do think it's definitely needed. One of the things I did was ask for a grant through United Way for flex funding. And again, it's for those things like, so you have 0 relatives here, you don't have any ties to the community, can we get you a bus ticket? Today, for example, I have a person who didn't want to go into a hotel because he has a vehicle that runs. And he said, I would like someone who has no vehicle to take that hotel room. And I even said, we have more. You're not taking, but his driver's license was expired and he needed some gas. So by getting his license renewed online, now if he gets pulled over, he's not going to lose his home, which happens to be his car. Or he's not going to go to jail for driving with an expired license. And then also got him some minutes for his phone. That way, if something happens, he does need to call somebody. So for everybody to be able to do that, when we all encounter people at different times, I think I just think it's great that you're looking at doing this.
Some other insight that we have, great need for more permanent supportive housing. I can't reiterate that enough. I think it's important to understand that there are a lot of people in the community that are on the verge of being unhoused or homeless that we see that struggle with significant mental health issues and substance use issues. To be able to tackle that takes a very long time. There are a lot of times that people they don't understand that they are mentally ill. That in itself is a challenge for all of us. So having that permanent supportive housing component allows people the ability to be able to not worry about where they're going to sleep for a long period of time. That then allows all of the providers that we are working with to be able to come in slowly and help with their trauma and help them slowly understand and realize that they do need resources and professional help. I can say that typically takes sometimes 18 to 24 months. So having housing even 3 to 6 months, yes, that's great. but we're still not going to have that success for folks. Because again, we need that permanent supportive housing component. Case management, wraparound services, community education. That's something that we really have noticed that needs to happen. Unfortunately, just like any other topic, there's a lot of assumptions out there on what organizations can and cannot do. The system is incredibly frustrating for all of us and very difficult to navigate. So hopefully we can figure out a better way to educate our community as a whole, because this is a community problem. This is not a city problem. This is not a police problem. This is not an organizational problem. This is a community problem.
Our team will continue to conduct outreach weekly throughout the winter months and gather information about the unsheltered population that we are encountering and reevaluate the outreach activities in the spring. The information gathered will also be shared with analytical insight. The consultant recently hired to develop a countywide action plan around homelessness. This plan is anticipated to be available at the end of April.
I just want to conclude by saying thank you to the outreach team. You guys are doing some really hard work out on the street, and thank you to the city council for continuing to support this work as well, not only through the Flex Fund, but also through the funding that you did put forward to help develop kind of a long strategic plan and bring people together. So thank you all for that.
The last part of our presentation, just some observations and ideas that our team has moving forward. So I'll go ahead and let Susan, if you want to start with that.
Yes. So sort of thinking, we brainstorm as a team, or what are some things that we need to have accessible to us short term? Things that we're asking for, like hand warmers, feet warmers, feminine hygiene products, small bottles of water, chapstick. All of those things are things that when we think about immediate need, things that we really would love to have access to, and to be able to take those things out with us, when we do that outreach. So sort of thinking big picture and dreaming, we've talked quite a bit about, wouldn't it be nice to have a concept like the bookmobile, but this is the human service mobile. And inside of that, we would have lots of things that we're talking about, envisioning that Arch would be a part of this, and our team would be a part of this, and we would have certain hours we were in the community. I agree. Some of these places are not accessible by bus. Sometimes people simply don't know where they're going, and having something in that one-stop shop concept, I think would be amazing. And I think we could reach so many people if we were able to do that. And again, dreaming big, but it'd be really nice if we had something like that we could access, have different hours in the city, even the county. And I know that's a different conversation with a different group of people, but just even having something that we could have where people could come and say, hey, we have lots of people that come up to us too. I guess Band-Aids and triple antibiotic were another thing. Lots of people approach us. I've had unhomed individuals tell me, if I just had access to a Band-Aid and triple antibiotic, I would not have probably needed to go to the hospital. I didn't want to, but I couldn't find anybody who had a Band-Aid.
Based on the outreach that our teams observed and encountered so far, it is clear that additional social service providers are needed, and many social workers and agencies are operating at maximum capacity. The outreach team has found that a team approach and working with other agencies and providers together, we can better assess and address various encounters collectively on the spot, eliminating the time lag that can exist communicating across agencies. An interim way to help the outreach team is through providing some of the flex funds to purchase transportation services, the food vouchers, first aid supplies, hats, socks, water and food, and etc. for these individuals.
So, and one of the things too is working with Arch. If you're familiar with the program, we do some scheduled outreach, but a lot of what we do is 911 response to these situations. So oftentimes it's not the individual calling, but it's somebody who knows them or sees them in public and calls 911 and says, hey, there's somebody down under the bridge sleeping or whatever it might be. And we go and address the need in that moment. So the challenge is, okay, we know these services are in place, but right now we can't snap our fingers and give you a place to stay because of XYZ, whether it's, they're timed out of somewhere, or they've been no trespass somewhere, or they have a pet that they, aren't allowed to bring wherever they're going, something like that. And so having flex funding in that capacity to say, okay, we can put you up for the night because it's 8:30 on a Thursday night. I can't get a hold of anybody who's open traditional hours, right? So it's like, okay, let's solve this problem, and we'll catch up with you in the morning, or we'll get somebody in touch with you tomorrow, and we'll kind of start the process there. And so that's really kind of part of what we're looking at as an outreach team is like, okay, we can, because I can call Julie at home and say, hey, here's what I'm working on, because we have this team, or I have my partner Becky, and we can kind of talk about it. And so that's the kind of another reason is like in that moment, we can't go to these places when they're normally available during the day. And another idea that's kind of been, floating around in my head that I've looked into is the idea of collaborative impact, which I don't know if you've heard of, or, it's kind of new to me, but it's essentially, a team that's dedicated to the collaboration of all the other teams, so to speak. So you have another team that's kind of running all the other teams and having kind of making sure that everybody's connected and communicating and on the same page with all of that. So it's something I've been reading about. It's called collaborative impact. It's a term that somebody coined who utilized that model to try to bring people together, because I think Ames does have a lot of resources and people that are working, but I think sometimes we're in silos, right? And so the idea behind collaborative impact is that you kind of have one person who's managing all of that. And they don't do anything unique, but they bring everybody together. So that's just kind of my big idea that I'm kind of throwing out there, is something that somebody might want to think about or read about. So yeah, that's what I had to say. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Sorry, I did have something else I did forget to mention. Also, the concept of a warming center. That was mentioned earlier. I know that they have one in Johnson County, Blackhawk County has them. Looking at places where individuals can go. If you're familiar with the concept of the warming, so that they can be during the daytime where they can't be at the shelter. A meal is served, and I know we already have the Romero House that offers that. Looking at how maybe can we expand on that. There are so many cool things out there right now with peer-to-peer mentoring as well, and looking at hiring individuals that have life experience with mental health and substance use, going through training and having them staff some of these warming centers. A lot of other communities are doing that.
Yeah, we have one of our, one of the individuals that actually, he was the individual that was living in a hut down by the river and has very significant health problems. He is now housed, and he is somebody that he has offered to even help our team find ways to better communicate with some of the folks that we find more challenging. And there are other people as well that we have gotten to know that I think would be a great asset to be on our team. Again, to have that peer-to-peer support, I think is, like Susan said, is very important as well. So to conclude, we would like to share that we are grateful for the support of some of our elected officials and City of Ames employees who have asked to come along with us to do outreach and see firsthand what it is like to provide outreach and support to our community, to learn more about each of our roles within our agencies, and to sit down with partnering agencies that provide support and services for those who are experiencing homelessness or are on the verge of being unhoused. Our outreach team would like to extend an invitation to council to come out with us on the days that we do outreach so that we can work together to better educate our community on what is happening, what is being done, the barriers that we face, and how we can come together as a community to help solve this problem. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to what the outreach team is doing. And I think I can speak for all of us that this is something that is really dear to our hearts. And we are seeing things that we didn't even know as providers that were going on in the community. And I really feel I need to give a shout out to all of the providers and organizations in this community that are working tirelessly beyond 5 o'clock on something that I don't know how we're going to fix some of these issues. But we are all certainly trying our best for the sake of our citizens. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions that you have for us?
I have one quick question. I know the state's not approving any more residential care facilities, but I'm wondering, and I don't know if Julie or Susan, you know the answer, the number of, or if we have any habilitation homes or intensive service residential home, 24-hour sites.
Your names?
So we do. Largely, those are through Optime.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure of the number of.
Yes, it's through Optime, and they are also opening sites in surrounding counties like Boone. And Optime is moving pretty quickly. And we also have what's called Ursh Homes.
That's what I was, yeah.
Was the Ursh Homes?
Okay.
Yes, and there is two right now that are operated by Optime. And an Ursh home, if you guys are familiar or not familiar, so that is going to be individuals that need the highest level of care. These are going to be individuals that haven't been able to be successful in maybe another group home, another HAB home, and it's really intensive. They have a much higher staffing to customer ratio. It's just a lot more intensive services. And yes, there are two of those in Ames right now.
4-bed? 4-bed? 2.
Two, I believe, right now.
Is that an acronym?
Yeah, IRSH, Intensive Residential Service Home.
Service
Thank
home,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Not enough beds. I'll just say that.
Yeah,
I can tell you right now, I have 4 people in hotel rooms that had maxed out their time. And that was even over 90 days that we were keeping people. And they're in there now because of the extreme cold. So they're on the streets if they weren't in these hotel rooms because they're still waiting, trying to get in. So definitely another thing that's very much needed.
So, sorry, I was just going to ask if we were interested in taking advantage of the invitation you put forward, Julie, what would we need to do to get into that loop with you?
So our outreach team, we go out on Thursdays from 11 to 3. We like to start out at the Romero House to catch folks when they are eating. So we can sit down with them and chat. So feel free to get a hold of me or anybody else on the team. If you'd like to go with us, we'd love to have you.
I was going to ask, what do you have advice for what other people like Good Samaritans or other citizens, what's the best course of action for them if they encounter someone who is out on the street and they want to try to provide some help? Are there numbers they should call at certain times of day, or what's the best way for folks who might be watching, or that we can we can educate maybe on the best way to get someone connected with your service or with services?
we're working on a decision tree type document right now that is a lot harder than I thought it would be. That we will get to definitely any service providers and to the general public. I would say always the Bridge Home would be first point of contact. Find out if they have an opening. And if they don't, they usually will call me, find out if we have any hotels available. Again, everybody that's out on the street, same thing. They're contacting Bridge Home and then us. And I would say that's great for the general community too. And just to add a little, we're not on 13th Street. So we're not quite as far out as I said earlier. So we're on East Lincoln Way, about 5 blocks off of Duff, and the Ease bus does come right to us. And we have bus tickets to help people too. So that's the other thing too. Like you can send people for that type of stuff too. So, but we are working on something that will make it very clear. Like here's what would be helpful. Here's what I should do.
Great, thank you.
I'll add to that too, because Arch responds, people call in to the police non-emergency line as well, which I think I don't know the number, 231
239 5133.
Better say that again slowly.
515-239-5133.
Yeah, and you can request Arch through that line when we're in service. So we're not 24 hours, we're 56 hours a week right now. But if we don't happen to be available, they can have an officer either respond or make a note for us to pick up on whatever is happening when we come back in service the next day. So we're always available that way as well. So, and we then can collaborate as well. So
great, thank you.
Other questions?
Will you be tracking this flex fund to know where the dollars are going, and then if council might need to take more action and allocate more funding to this?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, in the current, I don't know, employment climate, we know that we're having trouble attracting the sort of service providers that we need for amping up our efforts. And that was true before the team convened, and I'm sure it hasn't changed. So what should we do to try and amplify what you are doing, expand the services that you are providing in that kind of climate? I mean, would it be helpful for us to try to establish some sort of residence academy where people who are interested could be trained by the team to work with you? Or how do we do that? How do we magnify the wonderful things that you're accomplishing?
I love how you think. That's so. We have been brainstorming ideas just like that. One idea, and again, this is just an idea. So the city of Denver does this. They have volunteers who will go out and have lunch in the park with people who are lonely or unhoused. And really, it's just about getting to know one another. So we're not asking people their stories. It's, hi, my name is Julie. I work here. What is your name? And you start that conversation, right? So it's a relationship. You're building relationship with our people. And by doing that, hopefully we can help with destigmatizing, right? We don't have that fear of, and hopefully then we can educate our community on what they can do. I also would say that I'm going to put in a shameless plug for mental health first aid, QPR training and assist for every single person in this community. And to your point, I don't think that we are going to have enough providers for the influx of calls for service that we have even in this community. I don't think that's going to happen. So where it starts is in our own homes, educating ourselves, taking mental health first aid, knowing the signs and symptoms to look for. How do we respond to people within our home? Then we can respond to our neighbors. And being able to, I think, really get to know each other and not be afraid of things that appear to be scary, and educating ourselves, knowing the resources, but really knowing what they are, not assuming what they are. And again, we all do that. But I really do believe that it takes a community to be able to figure out a better way to solve some of these issues. Even if we had $1 million, I don't know that we would be able to solve the homeless issue. But I do think we need to educate ourselves on how do we solve some of these issues in our homes, and then bridge out from there. I'll let you guys talk too. I could go on and on about
Yeah,
it.
I think that I like to, if I could talk for another half an hour on this. I know you're all passionate about it. And I just want to thank you on behalf of council and the city of Ames for what you do and what you have been doing. It's significant. And council, I'll just remind you that it's because of your actions in November, trying to get an outreach team figured out, and then things just kind of Pod did a phenomenal job of pivoting because some things didn't work out. And then this team rose up and said, hey, we'll go ahead and take the bull by the horns and really trying to help. And it's been told that we have a huge influx of homelessness that we have not seen before previously. So I just think that you're to be commended. Thank you for what you're doing, getting this information. We're trying to really move forward and make a difference and try and help those who do need help. It is a complex issue, as you've talked about. There's not an easy solution. And you do have a consultant, a nationally renowned consultant, working right now with a report, hopefully in April. So we hope that this time next year, we'll have, even more, resources available. And Pa, she and I have been talking about how do you have a matrix. Your decision tree is complex, but there are so many people that do provide services. Helping one another know who provides what is going to be important too. We have a very long meeting, honestly, so I'm going to have to cut this off at this point in time. But thank you for coming, and I think we have an item on the agenda to take action on. Is there a motion regarding the allocation of the funds that remain?
John, if I could have one more question, probably just real quickly.
Please take it short.
Yeah. So I have an office downtown Ames, and a year ago, I would never see anyone sleeping in front of the public library. So this caught all the community by surprise. There would be nights when I would go home late, there'd be a dozen people sleeping in front of the public library. So it caught us all by surprise. I'm not sure any of us really knew what to do. So as an observation from someone who spent 28 years in our downtown, I think this is relatively new, this level. And in just the time that you've had to lean in on this, can you give the community even a sense of a ballpark number that generally is homeless in our community at one point? Is that a number that we are there 10, are there 50, are there 100? Can you even give us a sense of that?
Later this month is the point in time count. So I think we'll be able to do that at the end of this month when we actually go out and for sure look. I mean, yes, all of us who work with it can anecdotally say way more. I mean, the number of people I put in hotels, the number of people that are having to get turned away from the shelter, much larger. And it did become very visible. But as far as actual numbers, because it changes on a daily basis, the best we can probably do is that point in time count.
Yeah, and I think the consultant will be able to provide that data because they're going to draw information from the school district as well. So I think we'll know more when her report comes out.
So we'll look forward to that. And that's at the end of April, you were saying.
Yes.
My concern with just the timing of this was that I wanted to do that kind of count in the summer when there were actually people there. We could actually see them. I worry that in the winter months when it's so cold, it's difficult to necessarily find people to get accurate numbers, but that's for you guys to sort of work through. And I want to also commend you for the work you're doing. this is a complex problem, and I hope that we can find ways to work with the surrounding communities. To think about this in a silo, I think, is a terrible mistake. I don't believe these are all Ames people. I believe these are people that are not finding resources in other communities, and they're coming here. So why wouldn't we consider solutions in a more of a global perspective rather than just looking to us? So I just put a bookmark in that. Those are things that I'm looking for when this report comes back in April.
Thank you.
I move that we reallocate the $11,250 from the ISU Extension and Outreach Agreements to the local outreach team to use as a pilot flex fund.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Once again, thank you for coming in your report, and
Thank you.
look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, move on to item number 28, staff report on community-wide inclusion plan models. Cassandra.
So while she's coming up here, I'm going to kick this off. So one of the goals that council set before us was to do some research on community-wide inclusion plan models that exist across the nation. And so Cassandra is going to be presenting 2 models here today. One of the things that we noticed right away is that there's kind of 2 types of plans that exist. The first one are really plans that are that convene different community stakeholders, and they identify actions that the different community stakeholders can take. And then the second type of plans are those that are really focused on a specific organization. So in our case, the city's internal strategies to be more inclusive. And so what I'll say is that although Ames does not have a formal written plan in place, we have a long history of really embracing all of the members of our community. And our work plan continues to focus on that. So I'll turn it over to you, Cassandra, to present.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
So we'll get right in. And Paul already kind of alluded to this. And this slide right here is just making sure that we are aware moving forward with this presentation that there are many differences in these 2 reports. And so the first one is truly a community-wide, meaning that every sector of the community, they have all come together to develop, create feedback, and create this plan. The second one does focus mainly on the city. And to just note, it's important to highlight that Ames has and continues to prioritize its diverse community. So it does have a history with that, committing $100,000 to developing the plan back in 2022. The position that I'm currently in has been created and filled. We have in 2024 releasing the show Belonging in Ames, where we highlight different organizations and people within our diverse community. We already have, before I even started, a DI staff team to evaluate, enhance, and support DI efforts within organization. The Ames Relations Commission has been working on being an even bigger impact in the community. And the first report we're moving on is Decatur, Georgia. So here in Decatur, how they started was their strategic plan placed an even stronger emphasis on diversity. So then they got to the statement of they wanted to encourage a diverse and engaged community. So that's really where they started in order to create this plan. And their approach was creating a leadership circle, which was a steering committee made up of volunteers, residents, business people. So it was a diverse group of people. And this is a representation of who that leadership circle was. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about this specifically steering committee was that they were invited to volunteer on this committee, and they worked together first for several months before inviting the full community to participate. And this leadership circle is a mix of residents and business people. In addition, this piece that makes this committee and this plan unique is that each member agreed to commit to self-reflection, deep listening and learning, active participation, and cultivating authentic relationships to shape the overall focus and process for engaging the community and to actively contribute his or her gifts by co-designing and co-leading the work. That is very unique in any of the plans that I've seen. They created a subcommittee and they met specifically to manage outreach efforts and set 3 goals. Education, so that they could provide diverse residents populations with presentations. The second was invitation, to provide a welcoming invitation in various mediums to diverse residents to attend to the community conversation. And data collection was the third, in order to collect feedback. Here's just an example of what the report looked like in the community engagement methods used. This was the survey, the initial one where 724 people responded. The timeline was from July to August in 2015, conducting outreach. August 2015 was another getting together, a 1-day working across differences training session where different people were chosen, whoever wanted to volunteer, in order to be facilitators for this. So then again, the timeline. In August 2015, the facilitated community discussion was held. 250 people that attended, 625 ideas were generated from that session. In the second meeting is when they really funneled all of these ideas in order to create and prioritize out of the 625, and those resulted in the 71 action steps used to create the plan. Here's another example of what that timeline looked at in the report. So in October, the leadership circle hosted a meeting for any organization that was interested in participating in the plan. And then in November, they previewed the list so that more people could attend and actually prioritizing the action steps. So final products from the Better Together Community Action Plan indicator was that city staff mainly is the one that assumes the responsibility for monitoring the plan, engaging the community, and then implementing specifically the government action items. The Better Together Advisory Board is the board that even today is in place in order to continue to follow through and or assess if there's any changes that need to be made, but there is an active group of people that are moving things forward. These are the 6 focus areas taken directly out of the report the ones that they funnel down to move forward with the community plan. Another example of how specific they did the community part. There are action items that are dedicated specifically for the responsibility of individuals, organization, and then local government. And then this is just another example of that report that then also states what the target state for the completion, the resources needed, primary responsibility, prospective partners, and progress indicators for that. So this plan specifically from start to end took a little bit over a year, and they did use a consultant. And the unique part of that was also that the consultant was already a community member with Indicator. So the consultant was aware of culture and dynamics, which I think also helped a lot here. Here are all additional resources. It takes you to the reports, the website, accomplishments, and then you can also see who is on the current advisory board for this. The second report is for Salem, Massachusetts. And here it's also very similar, city council, mayor. Theirs was more, so in Decatur, theirs was a proactive approach, and in Salem, there was a reactive approach in order to figure out what the systemic racism and how to combat the efforts within the community. So the mayor's was the one that established this task force within the community. So it was, again, a diverse effort as far as the people coming together that were in the subcommittees. And there were five subcommittees that were created specifically to work on the plan. There was culture, education, economics, health, and public safety. And then this is just an example of a few of the different things and the autonomy that each subcommittee was able to have and the way that they went about it in their own way, depending on the specific conversations that they were having within, working with the board health, working with the public schools, analyzing data, looking at research articles, doing surveys, reaching out to community members. They also created a report, which from there, the city hired their DI director, and they also have a similar commission in order to implement pieces of the report and to gain some consistency in follow through. They worked just under a year. They did not use a consultant. Here are also the additional resources for Salem. And here is just the comparison overall strengths and challenge strengths and challenges. So for Decatur, it was really truly a community event. Everyone gathered together. It wasn't only the city that was moving things forward. People were interested, engaged, and there was a diverse set of people where they had not one, not two, but multiple ways in which they could engage with a plan. Salem, they had a diverse set of processes figuring out how to engage, and also the people who were within those subcommittees and had the autonomy to figure out how to do that research and that outreach. Continuing with strengths, Decatur's final product really had actions specific to, as I mentioned earlier, individuals, organizations, and local government, so that it didn't only fall on the city. And then that committee was established to see the follow through. In Salem, the process was less time and resource intensive because it was city staff led with the volunteers on the subcommittees, and there was no consultant. The challenges for Decatur, it might not be possible to do without hiring a consultant just because it did take so much time and effort. There was a lot of time dedicated to this. In Salem, the final plan is a set of the recommendations for the city, mainly to implement and do the follow through, which is lack of means for the accountability for all of the other community involved collaborative partners, and also did not use a consultant. So there's definitely benefits and for a consultant and to not have one. The challenges for Decatur, that did take more time. And because it was so community involved, the coordination, managing, developing, and all of those items might not have happened if they didn't have that consultant. So then the challenge for Salem is the plan, again, recommendations for mainly the city to uphold and then make accountable to the other community and the community organizations. Highlights overall, Decatur had a really big impact on the community engagement piece and how the action plan specifically was for everyone in the community, and the fact that they did use a local consultant. Highlights for Salem, the subcommittees were autonomous and really empowered each member of the subcommittee to follow through with their action items, how they best saw, how they best thought it should be followed through with, and the fact that it was a little bit less intensive for them. So as far as the community inclusive plans, they really do create a space for people to come together, engage, volunteer, share experiences, provide the feedback, and to really have the conversations how to be more inclusive. They do require a lot of time and resources. So my work ahead. So looking into 2025, part of my work plan moving forward is continuing building those relationships with the underrepresented communities, and strategic outreach to those specific groups, making sure that we're asking questions about issues that are important to them and what they are interested in, collecting that data, making sure that we're using it appropriately, and just having in mind that, yes, we don't have that written plan in place, but my work is in alignment with council goals and what we are all trying to achieve. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions?
That's a great report.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll start off. So tell us about the interaction you're having with Iowa State. So half of our community is Iowa State students, and a lot of the diversity we have is with our Iowa State population, both students and faculty. Have you had some conversations with them, and how do they see themselves as being part of this conversation?
That's a great question. And I think with ISU, it's an interesting conversation because it depends who I am speaking with, and it seems like I'm still having to have those conversations often to make sure that they know, hey, I am here. Let's do something. Let's collaborate. What are the things that are important to you? And I think there are so many different, not just people at Iowa State, but groups that are student-led, or whether it's student government, or it's a specific professor that teaches something. For example, in March, I will be presenting to a group, to a class that the professor teaches DEI in organizations. So I'll be presenting to her class. And I think that through each interaction, there's always a, hey, you should also talk to this person, or please come and present to our group or to our staff meeting. And I think that for Department of One, it also just takes time and consistent meetings, follow-ups, and I think it continues to just get closer to creating something that is more cohesive as a group. So I think that I'm getting to the point where we are getting people together from ISU and myself instead of just a one-off, because I think that the conversations that I am having with them, there's the common denominator of like, yeah, it'd be great to not do this on our own. So I think we're getting there.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you for this report and for doing this work. I guess one question that I have is that knowing that your position is coordinator and not director,
Yes.
then is it possible that bringing in, maybe not at the dollar amount that we were originally thinking, but a consultant of some type in order to make sure that we're thinking about what are all the benchmarks we should be hitting or could be hitting, thinking about looking at our policies and making sure that we're not inadvertently disenfranchising any groups, looking at the way that we operate in addition to that community engagement piece, which you're evidently doing well with, getting out into the community, finding out who's there, connecting with those who want to be connected with. And so I just wanted to see what your thoughts are about that, having looked at these two plans and thinking about sort of beyond community engagement, because there appears to be a lot of education that goes on within that as well that might be better served by a consultant.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts?
To be honest, I don't think we're there yet, because I'm gonna talk about Pa, because I think that Pa has been a huge resource to the city and myself with the work that I do, with the experience that she has and her perspective. I say I'm a Department of One because I am, if I have a meeting at ISU, I'm the one going, but I mean, it's really a team. And I think that the things that you just mentioned, Pa and I are making sure to touch base on, and to have the conversations of, okay, so what's next and what are we doing? And here are the action steps to follow through with that. So I think that it is always important to assess the opinion, the feedback, the idea. So I wouldn't say completely no. I just think that we're not there yet.
So perhaps when you come back for your spring report,
Sure, yes,
after
yeah.
your full
Yeah, then we can
a
reassess
year
that, and yeah, I could give
and
another
then
update on it.
revisit that. So,
Absolutely.
okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Cassandra, how did you decide on these two plans to present to us?
Yeah, great question. So
when I was looking through all the plans that are out there, many of them were, or should I say, there was an array of different ones. Some of them were 2 pages. So I said, no, that's not comprehensive enough. One was 142 pages, and I'm like, that's too much. So kind of like the extremes I took out. And then when I really looked closely at what does each report have, I found a huge pattern of many of them are let's work internally, and it's let's call it whatever they were calling it, but it was truly either all of the people that were involved, it would name departments, internal departments, and I'm like, okay, we have all those, but those were the only stakeholders. Those were the only active people or staff participating. And I was like, oh, that's just internal. That's not a community plan, because there's only so much that the city can say you're going to do. And also, that's not how we collaborate. We don't tell people to do things. We all bring each other on board to get to the same goals, right? So I think that was another big eye opener for me when I was looking at them, and then narrowing it down even more to, okay, these cities are working internally, but they're bringing in these community partners. So Salem really stood out for me for that reason. And the fact that the subcommittees were all made up of the people within the communities. Some of them were council members, some of them were professors, some of them were students, some of them were business people, and they all worked together. I mean, eventually you can see that it was still the city at the end kind of moving things forward, or that's where it was housed. And with Decatur, it was the only one that I saw at that time that was so community oriented, and that was so heavily engaging and truly involved people creating, developing the plan, providing the feedback, and making it what it was.
I think there were very interesting choices.
I am more than happy to send you all the information that I found if you're a little bit more curious about it. But yes, so they're the ones that stood out for those reasons.
How many plans
Yeah.
did you review?
Say that again?
How many plans did you review?
Over 40.
Yeah. Cassandra, I just wondered, you had mentioned in your earlier report about your conversations with other coordinators similar to you in Ann Arbor and Fort Collins and Columbia, Missouri. Were any of those conversations helpful to you in thinking about this community engagement piece? Again, because they're college towns, which would be more similar to what we're
Yes
like.
and no, because those conversations were also had almost 2 years ago. So I think that looking back on that, they weren't necessarily thinking about this type of plan. Again, this isn't a standardized practice, so everyone is really prioritizing the needs of that specific community, which I think is how they should do it. And at that time, they just weren't thinking or putting that as the top 3 things that they were going to do. So in that sense, I didn't really get a, hey, can you please share your plan with me?
Okay.
I did have another city not want to share who the consultant was. So, I mean, you live and you learn, and you realize, what information you can share with others and what some others don't necessarily want to share with. But there was a lot of learning. It's just, it wasn't necessarily for the piece that I was hoping to get, as far as, hey, here's a plan, this is how we did it. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any closing questions?
I have one. So I think it's valuable to learn from peer communities around the country, but I would specifically be interested in learning from communities in Iowa. So there are communities that have seen a significant change in their racial diversity, and they have spoken at the Iowa League of Cities conferences about some of the successes that they've seen. And I just, as a basic premise, I think when you look at the culture and history of Decatur, Georgia, I want to suggest that's going to be very different than what we have in Ames, Iowa.
Yes.
I think looking at communities in Iowa that have a similar history, culture, and background, and asking the question, what have they done to be successful in acclimating new residents to their community? I want to learn from Storm Lake. I want to learn from Marshalltown. I want to learn from West Branch, because these are success stories. And I've mentioned this on the dais before. If Iowa does not figure this out, we will die as a state. And so we have got to find ways as communities to be more inviting and welcoming. And I love the basic premise of your comments today, that this is an all-in approach. It's the business community. It's the faith community. It's all of the above. But I think that there are some really helpful lessons that we can learn if we're going to see the state survive. And I think Ames should be a leader in that. And so I love the idea of what can we do in Ames that would set an example for the rest of the state.
All right. Thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you.
Great report. And thank you, Pa. Appreciate your efforts. We're going to go ahead and move on to item number 29.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You're considering tonight initiating an annexation, which involves defining the boundaries of the annexation area and accepting the application. There are 7 consenting property owners that have submitted applications. They are highlighted in yellow on the screen. They include the Borgmeyer properties, which are the 4 largest properties. These are an unincorporated and undeveloped area that's part of our urban growth area and Plan 2040. So they represent the largest development area that could occur from this annexation. But we also, to the east, have these strips of land that are owned by Hunsaker that are adjacent to their Auburn Trail development and could add to that development, as well as the Northridge Heights retention area. With these properties, we have, when they would be annexed, they would create 2 island scenarios. So one would be adjacent to the Borgmeyer properties along George Washington Carver. There's 3 parcels of land that are adjacent to the city already. And with the Borgmeyer annexation would become islands. Similar scenario along Hyde. The Hunsaker properties currently form a strip of land that connects those to the unincorporated area of the county. So with the Hunsaker annexation, those would become islands. We're not allowed to create islands under state code. And so, as you know, we have the ability to annex non-consenting property owners if they're no greater than 20% of the annexation area, which will be involved with all the alternatives you're considering tonight. One final note on a property involved is the Ames Golf and Country Club. So that will become adjacent to the city when the Borgmeyer property is annexed. We do have agreements with those property owners to annex, and so that is also part of your consideration tonight, the timing and inclusion of those properties. So I'll just briefly go through the alternatives that were in the council action form. First would be to annex the Borgmeyer properties and the properties along Hyde, as well as the railroad property for more uniform boundaries, which bisects those 2 annexation areas. The point of annexing the railroad would be, for more uniform boundaries, which leads to efficient city services. So with the development, if we need to run utilities under the railroad, extend a shared use path across the railroad to serve those developments, it would make sense. This does include deferring the Ames Golf and Country Club annexation and Iron subdivision annexation until after the annexation of these 2 properties. Given the number of property owners involved, that would simply speed up the process for the Borgmeyer piece and the development of that piece. So of these alternatives, I said it was the middle time frame scenario for the Borgmeyer annexation, if we're thinking of pros and cons to each alternative. Alternative 2 would be the slowest annexation timeline for the Borgmeyer property. because it would include annexation of all areas at once. So we would need to get applications from the Ames Golf and Country Club property owners, as well as there are 2 properties along Hyde that we have annexation covenants as well. So we'd need to collect those, but it would provide some efficiency in being one application instead of consecutive annexation applications for the city in terms of processing. So we wanted to present that option to you as well. And then a third option would be to initiate the Borgmeyer annexation as well as the properties along GW Carver now, and then defer the Ames Golf and Country Club and Irons as well as the properties along Hyde until after that was completed. That would be the fastest annexation timeline for the Borgmeyer properties. However, we would need, the majority of the Iron subdivision properties to submit actual applications to us to make that 80-20 annexation work. So there would be, a need to really do a lot of outreach and make sure we get those applications in to make this option work. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. We all are also recommending with any of these options to direct staff to draft a developer agreement related to the Borgmeyer properties. And so again, your choices tonight involve timing and area, as well as directing us to start that developer agreement process.
Thanks, Amelia. Would you just, before other questions, could you just define, you said this would be the slowest or this would be the fastest? Can you kind of help council understand where you talk, when you say that, what does that mean, timeline?
Yes. So generally, if you initiated an annexation tonight and we had all the applications required of that, we would probably be looking at going to the City Development Board and concluding that process in June, just because of the public notification process. We have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We have to come back to you all, and then we have to go to the City Development Board as well. So an annexation typically takes around 6 months. So when you're doing consecutive annexations, let's say with option 1, we do the Borgmeyer annexation, the properties along Hyde, that might take us until June. And then within 6 months, we would initiate the Ames Golf and Country Club annexation, which, we'd try to do some outreach in the interim to those property owners, but again, might take 6 months or longer.
You said, I think the second one was the fastest one. Is that right?
For the Borgmeyer properties, the third one would be, just because we'd be annexing that area. We have all the applications in for that already. But I would just say with that one, we would need to make sure we had enough land area at the Irons that turned in their applications. They're required to turn them in, but we might have to do some follow-ups to get all those.
Yeah, it's still leave all the land along Hyde. Not included.
Right. So we'd want to make sure that was included.
So this seems to be the fastest for the Borgmeyer property, but if what has happened in the past happens here with the City Development Board saying you cannot have this oddly gerrymandered island left with the flags attaching it, doesn't that make this a much longer process then?
If it were rejected?
And
They usually do the opposite. They're generally fine with gerrymandering things out. It seems they're more, they review it more strictly when they are trying to meet the threshold of a more uniform boundary. That's when we got denied, was when they said what you're doing in our eyes does not achieve a more uniform boundary. But they don't force you to achieve a more uniform boundary if you don't ask. The board can't shape the annexation. All they can do is say yes or no to what's presented.
So I'd like to follow up with the mayor's question on timing. So my instinct on this is to try to bring in, with option 2, to bring in the 400 acres at one time, just so that we're not leaving anything to chance and getting all of it in at one time. Could you give us, though, I mean, last year we built 59 houses in Ames. So I'm really anxious to see houses come out of the ground. So there's a trade-off, right? The advantage is we get all 400 acres, but what is the downside in terms of timing if we went with option 2?
Sure. I think the downside would be we'd need to get those applications in from the Iron subdivision at Ames Golf and Country Club properties. That might take, a month or two. The upside of this option would be that given the land area involved, if we were unable to get all applications in from the lot owners in the Ames Golf and Country Club area, we may be able to include those as the part of the 20% non-consenting property.
So I hadn't thought about that. That's very helpful. And so
that's also true with option. Yeah, that would be true with option 2. Sorry.
yeah, I had not considered that. So that's very helpful. So that could speed things along if we had some participants at the Irons that couldn't get their paperwork in. And so if it's just a matter of a month or two in the big scheme of things, that seems like a pretty good trade-off for getting all 400 acres in. And that's really more of a rhetorical question. Thanks.
Other questions? So you said, I think the agreement we have with the Irons and the Country Club is there's supposed to be a 100% voluntary annexation when requested, right?
Yes.
Could they change their mind
They could.
or decline to want? I mean, I'm just thinking about, is this a similar type of agreement if that happened on state?
Yes. Yes. Similar to State Avenue. So
Where they ask for a deferral?
I suppose they could ask for a deferral.
You'd have to grant it, though.
Can you just restate the question for me one more time?
Well, we just recently had 2 properties on state that I had an agreement that they were going to, when we requested that they be annexed, that they would go ahead and annex, and they have asked that that we delay that. So I'm just curious. I'm thinking about the timing, and that is if all of a sudden people just start saying, no, I want a 2-year delay, a 3-year delay for whatever reason, how would that affect? I'm just trying to tease it out so that as we're moving forward, because obviously as Councilmember Garden indicated, we have very few houses being built, and one thing to do is try and accelerate available land and get things going. So I was just curious about that.
Right. I think if the people that are subject to the prior agreements to say you must consent, you must sign a voluntary annexation application at the request of the city. If they don't respond to us and don't do anything as we request, the only way to compel that would be to take them to court to enforce the agreement. So if that happens, everything we're talking about is just out the window. There's no timeline where it gets done in 2025.
Okay, I'm not asking that happen. I'm just asking, just trying to tease out all the different options that could happen. All right. If there's no further questions, we'll open up public comment. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic this evening? If so, if you please come up, introduce yourself, and if you try to limit your comments to 3 to 4 minutes, we'd appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Mark Taylor. I'm one of the nefarious non-consenting Hyde Avenue residents. For some of you may not have been here, a brief history is 7 or 8 years ago, the same basic area was attempted for annexation, and we formed a legal group called Homeowners Against Unreasonable Metro Expansion or whatever, and hired a lawyer and spent considerable money, and eventually took it to the City Development Board. And my perspective on why a City Development Board said no unanimously was they felt we had, as homeowners, were going to bear an unreasonable burden of cost for new hookups for things like sewage and water that we already had, for buying out our Xenia contract for rural water, which the last I heard was $22,000 each or something like that. The most recent number I heard was $3,500 per acre, which adds up pretty quick when you take my 12 acres. And I thought City Development Board's unanimous decision against the previous annexation was a result of, and their wording, I can't remember the wording exactly, was a failure of due consideration for the hardship on the non-consenting annexation properties. Now, I've been a member of the Ames community for 34 years. I was a surgeon at Mary Greeley for 32 of that. So I'm not up here anti-community, and I'm certainly not anti-Ames, which I consider a very nice progressive city. But it seems an unfair burden to just say, well, we don't want islands, so you're in. And the answer is we don't want in. It will change our lifestyle. There are certain restrictions of living within a city as opposed to living without a city. My wife's family has been in the area for 7 generations. And, you know, you can't have brush fire, you can't have fires, and you can't use firearms, and, you know, you can't have hog raising farms, but I realize what happened to the Native Americans. Progress is progress, and this is going to happen. And what we were told 7 years ago when the CDB turned you down was, well, we'll get to the 80-20 soon enough. And that's what's happened by attrition of the surrounding landowners, death and sales and moving away and so forth. We understand that this is going to happen. We would just beg some fairness in terms of what could be a 6-figure financial burden on each one of these involuntary landowners, which will result in the great benefit of getting higher assessment values and higher millage with Ames tax base.
Thank you.
Did I get under 3 minutes?
Yes, you did. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment. Council, following questions?
I mean, I always feel like these are hard conversations, and Dr. Taylor represents a number of those concerns. I think involuntary annexation is one of the most challenging things because we don't want to adversely impact anyone. So I want to make sure that's on the table. None of us take that lightly, that, you know, if we take all of your concerns at face value, those are real concerns. And so we want to acknowledge that we're hearing those. But I think we have the task of thinking through what's in the best interest of the entire community. And unless there was a reason to do something on a smaller scale, if it's only a couple months, it seems like we should just go forward with being able to bring in the larger parcel. I'm not hearing any downsides to that. If it's just a couple months difference, then that's a more efficient process. I'm curious if anyone thinks there's downsides to that.
I think the downsides are primarily to the owners of the properties along Hyde. I mean, it's not a downside to us, may not be much of a downside to the developer, but could be a very big downside to those property owners.
So it was your recommendation to look at the first alternative.
Yeah.
How does that change the conversation we're having right now?
I think the reason that staff recommendation was alternative 1 was it was the closest to the application that was made. But if you step back and say complete city perspective, then what Tim is saying is totally viable and similar to the request, right? It just takes a little bit longer to bring it all in at once. And any annexation is you're trying to respond to the applicant, but it's really a city policy decision. It's not an individual property owner's decision on how an annexation proceeds. It's up to the council to define that annexation every time there's a new application.
Okay. Thank you.
Kelly, can you speak to Dr. Taylor's comment in terms of, so if they're brought into the city, do they have to go to city water and have to buy out? Or
I'd like to address some of those things. So when you come into the city, there's no obligation to disconnect from your current well or your current rural water provider. State law, regardless of whether you're in the city or not, dictates whether you connect to a sanitary sewer system or not. So if you're within 200 feet, your service distance is 200 feet from your home to the sanitary sewer line, you would have to, at the end of the life of your septic system, connect to city sewer at your cost. Again, whether you're in the city or not. Coming into the city does not trigger or mandate either of those things happening. Buyout conditions, if you want to leave Xenia, that's between you and Xenia. You have a contract for service. The city of Ames has no say in that. So it's, again, we're not forcing you to do anything. That's up to you as your water provider. The comments about the City Development Board's decision, I don't have their findings in front of me. It was 2017 when we first tried to annex Auburn Trail and some of the properties on High that I was referring to, where the Development Board rejected that application. And my recollection was they found that it didn't create more uniform boundaries, is why it was rejected. There is nothing in state law about the financial conditions of anybody being a consenting or non-consenting property. So there may have been remarks, but that should not have been a legal finding if that was in fact the case. So again, those costs of buyouts and connections, none of those are triggered by annexation. And those are very common questions that we get, and we're going to get them from every single person in this blue diagram as we send out letters. What's going to change? What do I have to do? Now, the Irons is a little different. The agreement not only required that they annex to the city, but it also sets in motion future water service and future sanitary sewer connections further down the line, not upon annexation, but kind of as development of the Borgmeyer property progresses, then the rural subdivision essentially converts into an urban subdivision and matches city standards. The thought process was, right, we let them develop before they were in the city, but when the city was able to annex that property, that would then become an urban neighborhood instead of a rural neighborhood.
And so I think John's point's really helpful. As we think about the Irons, are we communicating with them about the implications of annexation? So some of those are brand new properties, and they would have recently, built their septic system in anticipation of having that for a while. How would they think about those investments?
So with all initiations of annexations, there's been no outreach yet. So a property owner drops this off, we look at it, we come to the council and say, do you want to look at this? Do you want to do this? And then from this action tonight, then we reach out to affected parties. So no, we have not yet talked to anybody related to the country club or the Irons. So there's going to obviously be a much deeper conversation as we go, because it's not just about annexation. And council will have the ultimate decision about how that sewer line trigger actually works, because until we have city sewer get there, which is going to be years.
Right, because it's a long ways out there to
do
that. Okay. Yep, thanks.
Yeah.
Other questions? All right, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion on one of the alternatives.
Move alternative 2.
Second.
Any closing questions or any closing comments?
Yeah, thanks for the really good report. I think this is super tricky, and we're always concerned about the law of unintended consequences if we do one thing or another. And I think there are a lot of pieces here. I thought the report was really well done. Thank you for that.
Roll call.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Edie Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Thank you. Next steps, Kelly, if you just share with us.
So with this direction, I think staff will be reaching out then to those properties that were not applicants at this time. So that'll include the Hyde Avenue property owners, and then we'll also be reaching out to the GW Carver and Country Club property owners, and we'll get a sense of their response and the timelines involved. Presuming they do what they've agreed to do, then we would collect those applications, and then we would formally start that notification and hearing process. It's probably a couple months out at least before we would have all that paperwork lined up. But if there's no road bumps, we won't be returning to council. If there's road bumps, we might have to come back and give you an update on what's happening.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Amelia.
Thanks.
All right, move on to item number 30. Corey?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight before you was a staff report regarding the development agreement with Workiva. A little bit of background. In 2013, the city entered into agreement with Workiva to create 700 new jobs, develop a 6,000 or 60,000 square foot building at the ISU Research Park, and then also designate Ames as the organization's corporate headquarters. So, as part of that agreement, the city also contracted with the Iowa Economic Development Authority through their High Quality Jobs program, and committed to providing $2,740,000 in tax abatement if the job numbers were achieved. And as part of that agreement, there was two dates in the agreement where the job numbers were measured. So the first was 5 years after the commencement of the agreement, and the second was 10 years, which just elapsed recently. So at the conclusion of the 5 years, the first measuring point, Workiva notified the city that they did not meet their job obligation, and so that ceased the tax abatement that the city was providing. The second measuring point was the 10 years, as I mentioned, just recently lapsed. And so there was a provision in the agreement that prorated any property tax abatement that was given to Workiva and assessed a penalty for that amount. So we've been working with Workiva on some of the numbers that they've provided. They've been very helpful in working with the city. They notified us that they expected a penalty of 77%, which amounted to just over $1.4 million. At issue is the classification of jobs, and so the agreement with the city called out jobs in Ames, and that's a little bit different than IEDA calculates jobs. They look at the whole state of Iowa when they're calculating their job numbers. Our agreement with Workiva specifically called out jobs within the city of Ames, and so that leaves really a question as to what jobs would qualify. And so I think as part of the staff report, we provided a few options related to the qualifying jobs number. The first was to accept Workiva's proposal for all jobs in Ames as qualifying jobs, or jobs in Iowa, as all qualifying jobs. The second was to direct staff to count only employees physically present on a regular basis as qualifying jobs. A third option may be to count jobs that are within a specific distance from Ames. And so really there's also a number of other categories that really could be called out for qualifying jobs, but really what we're here to do tonight is to request your assistance and direction in terms of what qualifies. And at that point, we'd work with Workiva to determine the penalty. So I should note that Jill Clint, which I probably butchered that last name from Workiva, she's the CFO for that organization, is here tonight. Should there be any questions that I'm not able to answer, you have directly of her.
Thanks, Corey. Questions?
I mean, this is a tricky matter. Workiva has been a great employer and a great corporate citizen from my perspective. And so some of this, it feels like we're splitting hairs on some wording issues. And maybe these are things that as we think about, because there'll be other agreements like this in the future that we would want to incorporate into our agreements to tighten up prospectively. Maybe Corey, the thing that I'm tending to want to lean towards Workiva's proposal on this. I think there's a lot to take into account. We're watchdogs of the public dollars, but we also have to take into account the relationship we have with a major employer in the community. So there's a lot to balance here. But I am concerned a little bit too for the precedent that we set for future agreements. And I don't necessarily know that I have any specific questions on this now, but I would ask that maybe with as if we approach another one of these in the future, that we would think about the way in which we draft this so that it creates greater clarity. I feel like we sort of put ourselves in the situation by not providing that.
Can I just respond to that
Oh,
quickly?
please, yeah.
So I think that we noted in the staff report and also where Kiva noted in their response that the nature of work has changed since this agreement was entered into. And so who could have had any forethought that working from home was going to be so prevalent in after 2020? Additionally, I've had some conversations with the IEDA. They've been focusing on they've had the same concerns. And so we participated as a local entity in the high quality jobs program. And so they've been firming up some of those requirements as they enter into new agreements too. So I think it's on everybody's radar in terms of what the qualifying jobs are. I think anybody had any foresight that what would have occurred, we probably would have tightened that up a little bit. But certainly as we look forward, I think IDA as a partner would consider that qualifying jobs calculation a little bit more specifically as well.
Yep, thank you.
All right, public comment. Anyone want to address council on this topic? See none, we'll close public comment. Is there a motion?
I'd move alternative one.
Thank you. And that is,
Accept Workiva's proposal to count all jobs located in Iowa as qualifying jobs.
thank you. Roll call.
Junk. Aye. Fetcher.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere. Aye. Garten.
Aye.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks for coming, Jill. All right, we're going to get into item number 31. Let's just take a 5-minute break, and then we will reconvene at 8:06.
I wish there were a snack machine on this floor.
You wish what?
There was a snack machine.
I already said that. I was gonna Google us in.
All right, we'll move on to item number 31.
Good evening. So we're here to provide an update tonight on the animal shelter relocation project. So as you all know, you were kind enough to meet a special meeting on December 26th to award a contract for Envision Architecture to look at this shelter project. And since that time, we've had a couple of meetings with Envision and talked about what it looks like going forward. So we want to provide you an update on that. And the first update is that, I think you know this part, the shelter is probably no longer adequate for the needs of our residents. The current shelter is not enough space, and we've had some issues with repairs and capacity and all those kind of things. You know all that already. So in hiring this consultant, we've also identified a possible location where we might relocate the shelter, which is located at 2715 Dayton Avenue. And you may recognize that as the old Eagles Loft Daycare Center. It's a little bit funny, but it's amazing how much a daycare center can maybe translate into an animal shelter. So we've looked at that property. It appears that it's got a lot of plumbing. There's good space. There's already a parking lot. So it has a lot of things, I think, going for it that are important. So this is just an overhead view of that property. It's a much larger property than just the old Eagles Loft building. So it's about 3 times the size of just that section. It's about 5.6 acres in total space. It was built in 1995, but after touring the facility, it's in excellent condition. It was very well taken care of. It was cleaned frequently, like every week. It seemed like every time we went out there, they were cleaning the building. This is the floor plan for the building at the time it was built. As you can see, there's a lot of open spaces in there that were classrooms. It's already got some office space. It's got a kitchen. It's got laundry facilities. So it's got a lot of those things that are going to be very important as we look at what may work for a shelter location. It's 12,600 about total square feet. So that's including a basement of about 1,800 square feet. That's about in the center of the building. It's not in the picture. It's dry, it's big, provides a lot of storage, all very good things. So now we thought we'd provide just a couple of pictures of the inside. And I'll tell you already that they don't really do it justice. You know, you say a picture's worth 1,000 words, not in this case, but this picture, these first 2 pictures are pictures of that basement area, which provide excellent storage. It's accessible from both inside and outside the building. So there's a staircase that goes up to the back area of that location. Open ceiling, and the entire building has concrete floors, which is important to us for not only stability of the building, but the ability to stub into plumbing and those kind of things. Just again, more open areas. So this is some of those classroom areas. Each one of the classrooms had a sink, bathroom. So there's just a lot of plumbing all over. The entire facility has a drop ceiling at this point that has a fire suppression system or sprinklers. So it's already got all of that built into it. These are a couple pictures of some storage in the kitchen area. So as you can see by these pictures, it's stubbed in for sink and appliances. There's a lot of storage. It seems like every classroom and area had at least a moderate sized storage area in it, which I think could be pretty advantageous to us. And there's several of those. Also already stubbed in lots of these little bathrooms with tiny toilets. Those will probably get changed out, but they're pretty cute. And it's also stubbed in for laundry, which is also important to the shelter. They do a lot of laundry down there. And so already having all of that stuff built in, I think, is probably going to help us going forward as well. A couple more pictures. There's several exits or entrances, both on the back and the front of the building. I think that provides us some opportunities. As you know, in the current shelter, we need to give some space for especially the dogs to get outside. There's even some reason to get cats some fresh air from time to time. And so those actually provide us some good opportunities. Big open spaces, long hallways, a lot of opportunities to look at. Office space already there, again, served as that spot in the front where there's kind of a reception area, office spaces that are already built in. We may not have to do much with those areas should this work out for everybody. Outdoor spaces, our pictures aren't as good as the outdoor spaces, but there's already several fenced in areas, and we would have to upgrade those. But there's sufficient area outside and around this area to provide much more than we have at the current shelter location. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk a little bit about the budget.
So we had a conversation with the city council just briefly at the budget guidelines session back in December to get a sense of how much the council felt would be appropriate to dedicate to this project for fundraising versus other sources of city funds. So we believe that a good ballpark estimate for the total project here would be about $4.455 million, just under 4.5. The land, the option agreement that we have is for 1.1 million. We believe that everything else inside, inside of the four walls of the building that would need to be renovated and modified would roughly total about 3 million. And then the remainder would be the design costs and so forth. So based on that total amount, which is again very preliminary at this point, we've got a couple of different sources of funding plugged in here. One was the city council allocated $100,000 in a previous budget for us to do some of the initial planning work, which we've used to retain the architect that is doing the facility evaluation right now, as well as do some other exploratory kind of work. The council priorities capital fund has a balance of a little over $3 million at the moment. And we intend to use that as the initial startup money to get this project rolling. So using $2.8 million from that fund, we would be able to purchase the property, complete the option agreement, and then hire the architect that would do the actual construction drawings and get construction underway. The project budget assumes that we would raise in donations about a third of the overall project. So $1.5 million. And we're working with an interested individual in the community who is willing to help spearhead that effort and organize the fundraising efforts. So that's our preliminary outlook for the budget. You'll see these figures again when you receive the capital improvements plan here in the next week or two. That plan will show the funding for the next fiscal year, as well as a summary of funding that's already been dedicated. What we're here for tonight is primarily to just give the council an opportunity to see this in a more public setting. We've had some conversations previously about this project, but we really haven't. It hasn't been during a regular council meeting, and so we wanted to ensure that the community had the opportunity to be more informed about what the intentions are here. And additionally, we wanted to just get the council prepared that given the timing of the evaluation that's underway and the expiration of the option for this property, we will be coming back to the council in early February for some quick decision making about whether or not to proceed. So we've got our consultant retained right now who's doing the feasibility evaluation, and will be able to, by the end of this month or early next month, give us a preliminary thumbs up or thumbs down regarding whether this facility makes sense financially to do all the things that would be necessary to it to turn it into an acceptable shelter facility. As Jeff stated, we believe from a staff standpoint that this facility presents a really good opportunity, and we can get into a shelter building a lot more quickly than if we were to try to build a purpose-built shelter from scratch. And additionally, we think that we can get a lot more bang for our buck in terms of the space that we would be able to utilize through this approach. So when we come back next, we'll have some decisions put before you regarding whether you're willing to proceed, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you. Questions?
Jeff, do you have any idea how large the Story County Animal Shelter facility is?
I think it's about 10,000 square feet, if I remember right. It's relatively new. And I think last time I looked, it was a ballpark around that.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I'm struggling tonight with the juxtaposition of this facility versus our conversation that we just had on the homeless. So we spent half an hour trying to figure out how we were going to move $12,000. And this is a facility of $4.4 million for cats and dogs. Now, I love cats and dogs, but the price tag on this just seems really steep compared to our conversation on how we're approaching the homeless. And if we spent $1.5–2 million on remodeling and maybe adding on to the existing shelter, would that be able to buy some time with that existing facility, or is it a foregone conclusion that the existing facility is just completely unusable? I mean, that dropping $1.5 million, $2 million in that would seem to me would be some benefit. You know, can you just sort of walk me off the cliff why we wouldn't want to do that?
Corey. Well, so while Corey is getting ready, we've had some previous facility evaluations of the existing facility, and a consultant who evaluated the value of, pardon me, of remodeling and renovating or / expanding that facility versus going to a new purpose-built animal shelter. And the existing facility just does not, it's not the kind of facility that is really worth investing more in.
Yeah, in 2019, we did that original study. I was part of that back then. Jeff and Brian weren't part of that one. So I'll jump in. So we did look at remodeling that. The cost was very high, and you'd have to move out the animal shelter during that process. It's really not set up to remodel. You can't just add on and make that work at that time. So that's why we looked even at a new facility at that time, which was about the same amount that we're talking about here, but that was in 2019. So as you know, construction costs have went up 30, 40, 50%. So that's why we think this is an option that could be feasible.
And as you think about the long-term use of this, if you look at trend lines of the utilization, the number of animals that we're serving, does the facility, as you're designing it, will it be able to anticipate and take care of those animals as we look at those trend lines going forward? And are there opportunities for expansion if this facility needed that?
So two parts to that. Part of what the consultant is looking at would be those trends. So we want to build something that's not just right for today, but is going to serve us into the future. The one thing about this particular property is it's pretty open to the west. So expand if in the future we needed to expand the actual building, it would be much easier at this location than anything down at the current shelter location. So I think it could definitely be expanded in the future. It's also roughly 3 times the size of what we have now. So that should serve us for quite some time before we have to look at future growth. But again, the consultant will look at those. We've got numbers. We can project out, what things might look like even in 10 years and whether this makes sense. And that's part of what they'll be doing in this evaluation.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And these numbers here are essentially staff's placeholders.
Absolutely.
Just to kind of give an idea of the overall scale. And there's been some communication, I presume, by staff, from staff to them, saying this is not a open checkbook type of a project. And so it may come back and say that we can do it for a little less, or you remodel less space and try and keep the cost down because you may not need all 10,000 square feet. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's all a part of this evaluation is what can we afford to do now? Maybe it's the whole thing. Maybe it's 75% of it. Our hope is that we can get the whole building remodeled, but that's what they're going to have to tell us, what we can get out of it. I think because there's some spaces within the existing building that may not need a lot of work, like the office areas, the kitchen areas, some of the storage areas. At least it's our feeling that that may help reduce the overall cost, that they're not having to fully remodel the entire building, like gut it and start from scratch. There's some areas they might not have to do a lot of work in.
Yeah. So our two biggest challenges, I think, are going to be the HVAC in the animal portion, and then soundproofing that dog kennel area. So those will be the two where we'll have to work with the consultant. Those will be the two largest probably drivers of the cost of the project.
So this is about 30 years old, is that right?
Yeah, it was born 1995.
Yeah,
is when the building was built.
So the consultant's also assessing the life expectancy of mechanical equipment that maybe they could reuse to make sure that we're not looking at in 3 years having to go out there and spend 150, 200 grand replacing furnaces or other things, I presume.
Yeah, right now it's basically served by residential units.
Mm-hmm.
Several of those, so maybe those will work for the office area. That's what they'll have to evaluate and work with us on. We know the animal areas, we're going to have to look at a new HVAC system,
Right.
meet the new requirements that are required.
I was just trying to think that it's part of their assess or charge to make sure that you get a report showing what the estimated life expectancy is left. And is it maybe it's 5 years or 6 years, and you say, let's just go ahead and get it all. So we got a 15, 20-year window of operations versus maintenance cropping up in a short period of time. I was just curious if that's part of their scope of work.
We can definitely work with them on that with their mechanical engineer.
And same for the roof, for example.
Roof,
I think it's got a metal
windows,
roof.
yeah,
Is it what's the condition, life expectancy? Because once it's done, it's be hard to go back and plow money back into it again, trying to get it all done at one time.
Yeah, I think we're sensitive to future operational cost increases. So we want to get this right now to ensure that, you know, in the face of future limitations to our ability to increase the budget, that we don't have unexpected,
right,
unanticipated issues crop up.
Yeah, just want to verify that they're aware of that's what our criteria is
Yeah.
too going forward. And if they are, that's great. Other questions, comments? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the report update. We'll look forward to seeing it in early February. All right, move on. Item number 32, purchase of some cable for electric. Mr. Com.
I'll stand. I talk faster when I stand. Good evening, Mayor, Council. The reason why this is not on consent, this is a little bit unique. So back in the fall of 2024, we went out for our normal request for bids on cable. This particular cable is going to be used for the South 16th road widening. So it's a project that's planned for this year. Went out for bids, got bids back, evaluated all of them, looked at the low responsible bidder and said, okay, we're ready to award to you. Council then at the December 10th meeting, I believe, approved the purchase order / contract, and everything was fine. We bought the lowest bidder. We then, after they received and they had signed off on the agreement, and council has also approved the agreement, came back and said, we cannot honor the price that we quoted. So this is a little bit unique. We have gotten bids in the past where before it's awarded, people have said, hey, I've made a mistake. Please pull our bid. So this one's a little bit unique. As we look at it, several things became apparent. First of all, we then looked at the next reasonable responsive bidder, and the price difference was about $75,000 difference. The low bidder was about $103,000. The next responsible bidder about $176,000. So when you look at that, that then also raises several questions. So staff again contacted the bidder and said, okay, tell us what happened. This is unique. And we also, as staff, looked at a couple things. We looked at what have we typically paid for cable of this size, and even noticed then in hindsight that their bid was unusually low. What we deduced then from the supplier was, I think fundamentally they made a mathematical mistake. Instead of looking at 1,000 feet, they were looking at 2,000 feet. So they divided it, what their number was, in half, and it was substantially different. From our standpoint, what we're asking for is to allow them out of their contract and then go with the next lowest bidder so that we can get the cable in here so that we have it available for project. An alternative would typically be reject all bids and rebid everything and then see what comes out. But in that particular case, then there's the possibility we won't get the cable in time, as you can see from the council action report, that it may then delay the cable by 6 months, which could or could not impact our project with Public Works. That's on the electric side. The other question that comes up, and I see Mr. Lambert's coming up, he's going to have a seat, is what are the obligations then of the bidder? Because we're talking a discrepancy of roughly $76,000. So maybe I'll let Mark respond on that piece of it.
Well, Steve had asked me, is there any recourse, legal recourse? And I said, well, we have a contract with them. They've now said we can't perform on a contract. We don't have anything specifically in our bid documents that says that there's a penalty. But it's the bottom line. This is going to end up costing us $70-some thousand more than it would have otherwise if and if they couldn't meet their bid, they shouldn't have submitted it, or they should have withdrawn the bid before it was awarded to them. So I am not 100% certain we can take legal action against them. I'm thinking we can, and I need to do some more research on it. But part of what's on here is just to authorize me to proceed to investigate that, and then I can move forward on that if I think there's a chance that we can recover something. It would, and I'm not talking about just filing suit against them. It would start off with a letter, and then we would see where it would go from there. So,
questions?
So let's pretend that they didn't make this mistake. And if they would have bid this normally, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Do you think that's correct? In other words, they made this bid out of a mistake.
That is correct.
And so I'm concerned about the taxpayers of the community. And so had there not been this mistake, this $75,000 is really money that was never on the table to begin with. Had they made their bid under normal calculations, we wouldn't have this money to discuss. So I think for council, where it's a mathematical error, I think we treat that differently. I'm not fighting for taxpayer dollars that under normal circumstances would have been there to begin with. So do we have any precedents, maybe look to you, Steve, in situations where there's been, I know we had one where a young engineer made a mistake, and we had a little discussion about whether we're going to hold them to that bid, and we ultimately made the decision to not hold them to that. And I don't think this is very common. We do these bids all the time. I think this is an anomaly. But are there any precedents that you would want us to consider?
The latest one is one you pointed out. I can't recall. It doesn't happen very often.
I mean, these contractors go through a process. They before they submit the bid, typically have someone else double checking it. So this is money that we're fighting for that wouldn't otherwise normally exist.
That is one way of looking at it. If this was a bigger project and we were bidding, let's say new windows in the power plant, and we earmarked a certain amount of money, and the bidder came in there and they had started producing, and suddenly they stop in the middle and say, "Oh, well, we can't finish your windows," or whatever. That would be a much graver situation.
So you said you looked at what you would have anticipated to have paid. What did you come up with? Is it in the range of what Wesco's bid or price was?
So what we did was we looked at the last time we bought this exact cable. It came out at about $25 per linear foot. And two things stood out. One was that was much closer to all of the other bids. The other bids from Wesco on down were all very tight. The bid from Van Meter was quite a bit an outlier, roughly half. It was, I think, in the $16 range, $15 range.
So it's pretty clear that something was amiss, but you're not going to say, sorry, we're not going to give you it because it seems too low. It's just more or less they might have had a chance to get something at a better price, and it seems like logically they made a mistake.
In hindsight, going back and looking at that, yes.
Right. Mark, I'm curious, how much time would you have to spend researching this, and what kind of cost be involved to even try and pursue, litigation? And is it really a good investment of time and money, especially in light of the fact that it appears that, according to Don, they may have made an absolutely honest mistake, and that Tim, I appreciate your point. It's really the taxpayers, not, if Van Meter hadn't bid for some reason or given a correct or a more reasonable market rate bid, it'd be about the same amount, and it's in the overall scheme of things.
Yeah. And I do want to clarify, it's the ratepayers as opposed to taxpayers.
Correct. I'm sorry. Thank you. I meant to say, thank you. Yeah.
I just need a few days to look into this and do some research, because it's not the kind of thing I deal with all the time, so there's two ways to look at it. One is like, we had a contract with them, and then they're like, we're going to back out of the contract, and then that's going to cost us 74,000 more. The other way is, what if they'd never bid, like you just said, Mayor, that if they hadn't bid at all, then we'd still be paying the amount that we're going to be paying. So, going forward, it might make some sense to put something in our bid documents that has a penalty of some sort if you end up backing out of you make a bid and you get awarded and then you back out. So we're reimbursed at least something in that situation, but we don't have that right now. So, in one sense, I can see that we're damaged, because we're going to spend 74,000 or whatever that we weren't going to spend, and we had a valid contract with them. On the other hand, whether that's actually something we can litigate over, I am not 100% sure, but I will have to do some research to get to that point. So.
Okay. Open up public input. Is anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Is there a motion on one of the alternatives or modified alternative?
I'll move alternative 1A and B. So A is the acceptance of Van Meter's request to cancel the purchase order, and B is to award the purchase to Wesco. But I'm not moving C, to investigate options for litigation.
Second.
All right, move second and roll call.
Betcher,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Rollins,
Aye.
Fourieri,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Johnson. Aye.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Mark. All right, move on to item number 33, hearing on text amendment to Chapter 23, Conservation Subdivision Ordinance. Good evening again.
Hello. I'll just keep this short in terms of the highlights of what you're going to see in this ordinance. So, as we've discussed, there's an elimination of the requirement that 80% of lots in a conservation subdivision abut open space. There's a reduction in the open space requirement from 25% down to our base zone requirement of 10. And then with those elements, we've also introduced a new focus on enhanced water quality best management practices and reframed the ordinance as a low impact development ordinance per our consultant's recommendation who looked at these changes. And then other changes requested by the AEDC task force were also addressed. So wetland protections now apply only to jurisdictional wetlands. We've introduced a provision that allows for more cul-de-sacs and different street lengths if we're protecting natural resources. We've clarified that mass grading is only prohibited in natural areas, and that's only unless it's not benefiting them. So restoration work grading to restore natural areas would be permitted. And then we've also just clarified that when you have a requirement for usable open space in a base zone, so for instance, in the floating suburban residential low density zone, you have to have 10% common open space. That has to be passive or active recreation space. The conservation areas in a conservation subdivision don't also have to be passive or active recreation space. They can just be open space conservation areas. They don't need to also have, benches or other elements of a park or something like that. So with those changes, we did reroute the ordinance to the development interests. So for Auburn Trail and Hayden's Preserve, and we did meet with the Friends of Ada Hayden again. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this and did recommend it to you all. They generally just had questions to ensure we weren't impacting water quality of the lake. And so I guess in summary, we believe with appropriately designed development, following the standards that we've put forth in the ordinance, this will benefit water quality, especially compared to current farmland conditions, and it will result in some gains in intensity for development in the area as well, while still preserving natural resources. So I'm happy to take any questions. The recommendation is for alternative 1.
Thanks, Amelia. Questions?
I'm blown away by just how much work went into this. And I think it represents just how, as a city, we value listening to the community. There's a lot of balancing that went on. And as a result, we've come up with a much better plan than we had before. I did want to ask a question just to confirm this. So we put this in place, but we're going to continue monitoring water quality. So we're not taking our foot off the gas on protecting Ada Hayden. We're going to try this out, but if things don't go the way we anticipate, we would know that through water testing. Is that correct?
No, but I think we could tell, with the wetlands.
I mean, in a simplistic way, right? We're monitoring the water quality of the lake. We would not know why the results of the tests are different from any one particular source necessarily, right? So if Auburn Trail gets built and then 3 years later there's a change, we wouldn't know for sure that was a result of that development in the watershed. If we saw a trend and we hadn't seen all of the development area be done, maybe there's a reason to pull back on it for future development. But then there definitely would not be any recourse back on an approved project if water quality started to turn different in the lake.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you for that.
Yep.
I just a curiosity question. It says on your report, grading and other disturbance of natural resources contained is not permitted unless allowed by Public Works Director. What does natural resources mean?
So yes, so as part of this process, a developer will do an inventory of natural resources on the site. So that could be prairie, it could be forested area, it could be jurisdictional wetlands. Those identified resources that are in good condition then would be recommended to be placed in conservation areas. And so that provision that you just read about is about grading. So when you have those natural resources in those conservation areas, we then wouldn't permit disturbance unless it was for their function or benefit.
Yes, given the fact that so much of that land up there is really natural resources, it just seems to be a little confusing. It just see what I'm saying? Like there is there may be prairie, there may be other things. So is it saying? I'm just trying to understand because when they go, usually a developer goes in and do a big development, it's pretty much everything is being.
That's what you can't do. That's the mass grading. So currently, we would prohibit that on a large scale, like you would see anywhere else in the city. And what the changes are doing is we're restricting the scope of the mass grading limits to the defined resource areas that come out of that inventory. The rest of the site can have much larger scale grading activities.
Okay.
So I don't think there are a lot of resource areas in the water.
Okay.
Not natural ones that are already there.
I took great encouragement that you worked with the developers and there was no additional comments, that you worked with Dr. Pease and the Friends of Ada Hayden, and they're supportive of it as well too. I mean, I just doing that due diligence gives me a lot of comfort that we're trying to accomplish common objectives and not compromising, one of our crown jewels in the city, that is, Ada Hayden. So, other questions? Open up public comment. Dr. Pease, I don't know if you wanted to address council and just tell us what a good job their staff is doing. Or... I know they are.
That's one of the things. First, I want to commend the council for asking.
By the way, this is Dr. Pease, Jim Pease.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jim Pease, the president of Friends of Ada Hayden.
Thank you.
Heritage Park, 3840 Stagecoach Road in Ames. I want to commend the council, first of all, for asking the Planning and Housing contract with a consultant to talk about that. And I think that consultant did a really good job. And further, I think the staff has done a very thoughtful job of incorporating what the consultant recommended into the rewrite. And this is I don't know if you saw the original, but it was a pretty extensive rewrite. And I think Amelia and colleagues did a great job of that. It's really, as you mentioned, Tim, it was a lot of work went into this. I really appreciate them working with us along the way and incorporating some of our comments as it went along. So we're supportive of the changes in a general way. We think that it, in particular, I like the whole idea of a treatment train on the land. I think it allows enough flexibility so that as technology changes and we come up with new ways of treating water as it runs off of impervious surfaces, and there will be new ways, it allows that to be incorporated into a development in a thoughtful way. I would hope that Planning and Housing would continue to consult with us, particularly as they look at approval of certain aspects of these. We really appreciate being consulted, and I think we can offer some expertise to them in that regard, and it's free. So, in general, Friends of Ada Hayden, I think, are very supportive of the changes in the ordinance. We never like to see smaller amounts of open space going from 25 to 10, but I think in this case, I think we're still protecting the wetlands and the Ada Hayden Heritage Park. So reserve the right, of course, to disagree somewhere down the road and say, "Whoa, we better back up and redo some of this." But I think if you're amenable to that, then we are certainly as well.
Well, first of all, thank you on behalf of council and the city for all you do, and Jerry, you also. Thanks for coming and staying, and for your feedback and endorsing the changes. Appreciate it. Any other comments? All right, we'll close public input. Is there a motion?
Move alternative one.
Second.
All right. Roll call on the first passage of the ordinance, please.
Edie Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Fourieri.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. Thank you, Gelly. Great work. Appreciate it. All right, move on to item number 34, hearing on text amendment creating a criterion associate permit for special temporary events, Chapter 29, Article 13, and Article 15. Any questions for staff on this? We'll open up public comment because it's the first passage of the ordinance. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic?
Glenn Ballard, and thank you to the mayor and council for inviting me again, the owner of the property. And my request I sent out was to speed up the process. And the reason we've already received funding from Discover Ames with that group, there's 35 contracts that we have to fulfill for vendors and actors, and we're getting kind of right down to crunch time. So that's what we're asking is the approval. If you have any questions, we're a daytime show, but boy, these actors are hard to lock in. And what's my role? My role is we're the property owner and we're helping these kids from Iowa State. And it was very successful last year. But we're really going through some tough times now with advertising, with sales and requests that this kind of a renaissance requires to move forward. So if there's any questions or anything I could answer.
Thank you. Appreciate your feedback. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Entertain motion on first passage of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Roll call.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
Feedy Hansen.
Aye.
And as Mr. Ballard indicated, he did send out an email requesting council consider suspending our rules and proceeding with second and third reading this evening. I explained to him that isn't always the case. It's at the discretion of council. We also have a work session next week that we could do second and third reading, or it's up to the council if you wish to suspend the rules and have second and third reading of the ordinance tonight.
Move we waive the rules.
Second.
Those in favor of waiving the rules, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Entertain a motion on second passage of ordinance.
Move on second.
Second.
Roll call.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
Feedy Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
And entertain a motion on third passage of ordinance and its adoption.
Move on third.
Second.
Roll call.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
Feedy Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Very good.
So just so I understand, so are we approved now or will we?
It'll take 20 or 30 years for it to go through. Kelly will explain the process. Thank you for coming. All right, move on to item number 35, second reading of zoning text amendment to allow social service providers in the single family conservation overlay zoning district. And council, our policy has been is that after first reading, we do not invite public comment, given the nature of this particular issue. And we've had some people in the audience who are been here for over 3 hours. I'm going to proceed with inviting people to offer input on anything which might be new or unique information, or they haven't had a chance to speak before. And so I know one person signed up. They're welcome to come up if they want to, but really it's more or less not rehashing the whole issue, but is there new information or things that you haven't shared before that's important for council to know because we will not have a public input on the third reading. All right, we will close public comment. Entertain a motion on second reading of the zoning text amendment.
Move on second.
Second.
Roll call.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
No.
Feedy Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
No.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
All right. We'll move on to item number 36, third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4544, industrial tax abatement for Whiffle's site, Plan 220 South Teller Avenue, which was continued from December 10th.
Move on third.
Second.
Roll call.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
Feedy Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Thank you. Move on to disposition of communications to council. There are 4 items. I was on item number 1, a email from Mr. Steffen requesting council give direction to staff to do a building code for city regarding requiring additional charging stations provided. That would certainly need to be added to the staff work plan. Is there an interest at this time to direct staff to do so? Or a request a memo or anything else regarding this topic? Or thanking him for his letter, and we're not interested at this time.
I would move that we thank him for his letter and tell them that at this time we wouldn't take that up.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Second one is the request from the Ames Human Relations Commission, and regarding this, a resolution regarding all are welcome. And I think we heard from Cassandra all that we are doing at this point in time, and I would just suggest that we a motion something to the effect that acknowledge receipt of his request, and that it already aligns with our existing values and existing council resolution that affirms our commitment to value, equity, fairness, inclusion, and justice in the city of Ames. And actually, this resolution was reaffirmed by council in 2016 in lieu of going ahead and adopting the resolution that they're asking for.
I would move that we move forward with that concept.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried, and I will let Dr. Chen as well as Mr. Mormon know about that. I'm sorry, Lohman. The other 2 I pass on only because the Iowa DOT asked that I notify the city council of what's going on these projects. So it's just primarily for your information. No action is necessary. All right, report of governing body. A report from Discover Ames tonight.
They'll be meeting this week.
Okay.
Yep.
How about Ames Regional Economic Alliance?
I didn't attend the breakfast the other day. Perhaps Tim has something to report from that legislative breakfast.
Yeah, it was a huge turnout, and relevant to the city council. There was a large discussion of the impacts of property taxes, and at least in that context, the legislators express an understanding of the impacts that those changes would have on municipalities, which I was very encouraged to hear. So that's I think the big takeaway for us is I think we still need to continue to communicate with our legislators about the importance of maintaining the current status of property taxes and not make further changes that will harm cities. But I think the legislators received a wide variety of opinions on this, and I was very encouraged, surprisingly so.
Good. Story County Emergency Management Agency meets next week for our annual meeting. I'll be in attendance at that one, so I'll report at our next meeting. And how about transit?
We have a meeting later this week.
Thank you. All right, move on to council comments. Is Emily still on?
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry guys, I'm kind of getting over a cold right now, so I'm a little bit behind on my emails and everything, but I will be back in Ames this Thursday. And over winter break, we determined the date of the spring joint student government city council meeting and that will be on Wednesday, March 26th at 5 p.m. in the same room we were in last time, which is the Memorial Union Sunroom. And yeah, that's not all I have until I meet with Martin and Quinn when I get back on Thursday.
Very good. Thank you. Gloria?
I would just like to double down on the recognition of Richard Deo earlier. I will miss seeing Richard at the door and having those interactions with him at events. He was very committed to attending our meetings and the League of Women Voters and many other community events. And I think his presence will be missed.
Pamela?
Yeah, I would just agree with that. And I think that's all I've got for tonight.
You want to point out what you're wearing?
Well, my shirt, yeah, I wore that in honor of Richard tonight.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks for doing that. It's
Yeah.
just heartwarming to see it.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Similarly, came through the doors tonight and thought, oh, I'll see Richard, but anyway, so he will be missed. I did want to ask if we wanted to consider allowing Mark to look at tightening up our contract verbiage per the conversation about this piece with Van Meter. So I would make a motion that we allow Mark or to take a look at our contracts and see how we can protect ourselves in the future should there be a signed contract and then we find that there's an error. So
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Anything else?
January is school board appreciation, and so it might be a good time to reach out to school board members and let them know that we appreciate their service just as we are also serving our community. So
thank you. Amber? Jim?
So I would also echo sentiments on Richard. Sometimes the proposals just were hard to understand, but they were all very kind. Richard was, there's one word that I think of for Richard is kindness. And we could all use a little more of that. And many times in meetings, he would be the literally only person from the community here. You got to get some partial credit just for showing up. And so appreciate Richard's support of the community, and he will be missed. On Monday, we have the MLK celebration, the community celebration. That's going to be here at City Hall at, let me double check my time here on that. I apologize. I should have had this queued up. I believe it's 6:30, but let me double check that.
We're looking for?
The timing of the MLK, is it 6 or 6:30?
It's 6.
6 o'clock.
So the social starts at 5:30.
That's right. 5:30 is the social. They have cookies in the gym, and then the program starts at 6 o'clock. It's a great community-wide program. That's all I have.
Thank you. Rachel?
I would just echo the comments of Richard as well. I wore my happiness is important button to honor him today, and I hope he's in a happier place.
All right. Thank you. All right. We will move on to item number 38, Resource Recovery Recycling Campus Location Updates.
Good evening. The next step in developing the Resource Recovery and Recycling Campus is selecting the site to develop the facility. in evaluating the sites, we looked at 6 main criteria: the adequacy of the lot size and the topography of the lot, that it would easily facilitate the development and the use of the site. And then how convenient is the site for haulers and for individual customers to access the facility? And then what is the use of the surrounding area? Is the lot that we're looking at compatible with what's going on around it right now, the land uses that exist adjacent to it? And as we discussed in December, we're moving forward with our negotiations with Carroll County Landfill. So another important piece for site selection is how easy is it to access Highway 30 from the site? And then, of course, with developing any site, are there utilities adjacent to it, or can utilities be easily extended to serve the site? And then, of course, what is the cost of purchasing the property? And with a deadline, in essence, looming of July of 2027, how quickly can we get moving on development of that site? So before we get into looking at any specific sites, reviewing what we've looked at, let's look at some photos of other facilities, other transfer station facilities, so you can get a feel of what it is that we're trying to develop. This facility is located in Tacoma, Washington. So you can see there's loadout bays that are lower than the main tipping floor, landscaping, office space. We need to have a place for the household hazardous. We'll be developing a space for the recycling, so both the community-wide curbside as well as the customer drop-off. Then we'll also have areas for yard waste collection, as well as then in the future moving into composting. So any other uses I've left out?
So for us to be able to accept municipal solid waste, potential for C&D lighter loads, so we can reduce the carbon footprint going to either the Carroll County landfill, Metro Waste, East Park landfill, or Marshall County, or any of the other surrounding landfills, to be able to accept that waste here. And then in addition to that is the electronics, the TVs, the monitors, food waste. As we grow these programs, we're going to need the space to do that.
So it'd be important to find adequate space to develop what we currently are dealing with, as well as to accommodate growth in the future. And we really want this to be a true community asset. We want to be proud of it. We want to bring people to it. We want to use it as an educational resource. So we want it to be a very a nice looking facility. This one is in Pomona, California. Another one in Auburn, Washington. And then here's some closer to home. The top is the Metro Waste Authority in Grimes. We've toured that facility a few times. And then the bottom one is Cedar Rapids, Lynn County. So you can see these new modern facilities were really developed to be aesthetically pleasing sites. They're all incorporating landscaping, all those screening, all those required features. So as we were looking at,
do you know, do they have on-site, what we're talking about, organic waste? Do they have composting? Do they have other things in these locations, or is it all internal?
So most of these are transfer station and resource recycling or material recovery processing facilities. Some of them do have yard waste and processing for organics, but it's on the backside of the facility to where it's shielded to the general public view.
Thank you.
So that's different than what you see at the Pomona facility, which is all inside. I mean, that's how I took it, that it's fully enclosed facility with odor control, ventilation systems, et cetera.
Yep. So that one is all basically a transfer station. So it's one of those things where they can cite these facilities where it's ease of access, public education, outreach, something that they can showcase and have close to everybody for convenience. But then also nobody driving by this would know that there's solid waste or recycling programs going on here.
That's a remarkable statement by itself.
What's that?
That's a remarkable statement. I mean, so to Gloria's point, odor control is something that technology is incorporated into these facilities.
Is that incorporated into the ones in Iowa, in Grimes or Cedar Rapids?
So those, I think where they're located, they didn't need to have anything for odor control. So for our current resource recovery facility, depending on operations and the power plant and how much material we have on the floor, it can get pretty bad. But with the transfer station, most of that waste is cleared out at the end of every day. There's nothing sitting there. There's nothing decomposing either.
And they're developed with the negative air pressure and also air cleaning equipment and filters. And
yeah, so we'll still have to have everything for the air quality permits and controls for any of the drop points, filtering, make sure there's no particulate dust being emitted either.
And we discussed in a prior meeting that we'd have a need for some storage. For example, got the crazy snowstorm, the trucks can't roll to Carroll. We would end up needing to store material. Our facility is going to have a certain, we're going to calculate how much storage we would have to have as a contingency.
that's right.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
So as we were looking at different sites, we looked at a number of sites, both private and public. So under this item tonight, we'll review the two public sites, the two city-owned sites that we gave full consideration to. The first is across the street from our existing facility, which is the former coal yard. I guess for the interest of time, maybe I'll cut to the main issues that led us to not want to move further with these two sites. With this site, Electric has plans, as you know, to develop the city or the facility for future generation. So they have plans to utilize this entire site for the future generation that they're developing. So that space would not be available for our transfer station.
How does the site, John, my understanding is that the size also is a limitation and also the cold mitigation, is that correct? So it's not just another use, but it's also inadequate square footage, is that correct?
Correct, yep,
Yeah, so
on
it's
both
just-
accounts.
just
Yep.
on multiple accounts, it's just not practical.
Right, correct,
Thank
yep. Then the next site that we took a hard look at is what we refer to as our west yard. So this is our operations, storage and laydown yard. This area is utilized by Electric Services right now for transformer storage and other storage of other items. Some issues with this site.
Where is it? Where's Lincoln Way?
Lincoln Way is down just off the paper, and then Dayton is just off to the right edge of the paper, and right here is our City of Ames fleet and facilities. So a couple issues with this site. Both roads, Edison and Carnegie, are currently gravel, so they would need to be paved to access the site. But really the bigger issue is we found that this is part of a former, using the term landfill is generous, dump really from the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Mhm.
And there's 25 to 30 feet of garbage underneath that area. So that wouldn't facilitate the development of a facility like ours. So those were really the two sites that we really took a hard look at for viability. And for the reasons mentioned, we we feel that those sites aren't really viable to move forward with. So any questions on either one of those sites or maybe the process that we looked at?
All right. Any public input or comments on this before we move on to item 39? Seeing and hearing none. Mark, does council have justification to go into closed session to discuss a couple of items?
Yes, the council has justification under Iowa Code Section 21.51J. The council can go into closed session to consider possible purchase of particular real estate.
Thank you. And we need, could that motion also include, or is one motion adequate to cover 2 items, or do we need to come back out and then go back in again?
Since they're really separate topics, I'd prefer that we come back out and go back in.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
We go into closed session.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.